Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are just about to go ahead and get started. So, if you guys can all share out the live, like the live, if you can share in any discords, send it out. We're gonna get started here in about 10 minutes. We're gonna have special guest, Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. Salam, salam, mo, salam, everybody that's coming in. So, if everybody can, share out the live. We're going to get as many people in here as possible. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Salam, everyone. Salam. So today we're going to have Dr. Feroze Sidhwa as a guest speaker. So if we can get this out, share it out to any, if you're in the Discord, share it out in the Discords. And just share it out. We only got 2 shares, guys, so let's get as many shares in as possible before our guest speaker joins us in just a few minutes. Salam, Anisa, salam. All right, everybody, let's try to get to maybe at least 50 shares. I can see the shares going up. Thank you, everybody. And then we will get started. So really excited for this guest speaker. It's very important that everybody is here to listen, have an eyewitness testimony from what he witnessed and saw. He is an absolutely amazing, amazing speaker, and he's been featured on many, many different news stations and networks. We're also going to be having a Q&A session at the end. So anybody that has any questions will be able to come up and ask a question. Inshallah, we'll get to have everybody do that. So that'll be towards the end. We'll have like about 30 to 40 minutes maybe, depending on the time for Q&A session. So let's try to share this out and we'll go from there. Really, really excited. Thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate you guys. Mike, thank you everybody for sharing. Salam, salam, Afrado, salam, Jasmine, everybody, Ramallah, appreciate you guys. Let me go and share out the live to him as well. And we'll get started here in just a second. Tap the live, tap the live. Thank you guys. Thank you. If you guys, and then if we can protect the live. So if you're not part of the team, join the team at the top. I would appreciate that. I know if there's any Zios that come in, they'll try to report this live. So we want to make sure we get this live protected, inshallah. And we will go from there. Thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate it. Keep the questions, if you have any during the live. I'll try to, if you can't come up, I'll try to read them to him so that way he's able to answer them. But hopefully I'll be able to get everybody up here. And then we're just going to be waiting for him. So we have about 5 minutes, inshallah, and we'll get everything started. And he also is not aware of the TikTok language, so that's going to be interesting. Hopefully, this live was protected. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Salam, Linda. Salam. Thank you, Apple user Alina. All right, let me fix the layout here so we can get some people up. All right.
السلام عليكم.
Wa alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. Welcome, Dr. Knockout.
الله يسعدك. Well, right now when you shared the live, I'm like, oh shit, she did tell me there's a شو اسمه.
Oh, you
بطلت من
forgot.
زي. والله I forgot. منيح لي شو اسمه.
Alina, welcome, Alina.
I told my people about it when we got done with Crashed Out today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here. Alina's amazing, guys. Make sure you follow Dr. Knockout and Alina. They're both amazing. Well, W. Thank you, Fax. Thank you. All right. W Knockout. Okay. We're just waiting for him to join us, guys. So if we can just like and share the live, join the team, and then we'll go from there. All right. Looks like we have, oh, wait, hold on. Let's see here if it's working. I think he's here. We just have to, sure it's working for him. Thank you. Thank you, Ramallah. Thank you, Mel. Dr. Sidhwa, I think you're here. I don't know if it's working. Oh, there we go. Are you with us? I don't know if we can hear him.
I
Let's
think so.
see.
Can you guys hear
We
me?
can hear you. Yes, we can.
Sweet.
Let me see if this is working. I just invited you to
Oh, cool. There we go.
share that with us. All right. Welcome, welcome. Guys, can you guys see him? Should we do a different layout or turn the comments off, or can you guys see him well?
No, we can see him.
Okay.
He's wearing a dark shirt, so the comments like
Yeah,
contrast
we
Okay, it
can.
fine.
Yeah,
works.
we can see. Yeah, we can see him. We can see the comments too.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you guys for being here. If you guys are just joining us, please continue to share out the live. We can get as many people in here as possible to listen to this. This is very, very important. We have a special guest today, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So we have Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. He is a general trauma and critical care surgeon in California. He is also a humanitarian surgeon, having worked most extensively in Palestine, but also in Ukraine, Haiti, and Zimbabwe. He most recently volunteered at the European Hospital in Khan Yunis, Gaza, from March 25th, to April 8th of this year, with the World Health Organization. Dr. Sidhwa has written and spoken extensively about surgical humanitarian work, the United States' role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the political consequences of medical relief work. He approaches the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a secular American and as a humanitarian physician. It's with great honor to introduce to you Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Feroze. Thank you, Dr. Knockout. I want to go ahead and kind of get started. If you can tell us about your experience while you were in Gaza.
Yeah, I got to Gaza on March 25th. The Rafah crossing was still open back then, so we went through after coming across the Sinai. Back then, you could take all the equipment with you that you wanted. Now you can't take anything, unfortunately. But so we took all of our equipment in. We went up to European Hospital, which is about 15 minutes north of the Rafah gate, and we got to work. The what we saw was pretty terrible, to be perfectly honest. It's Gaza is a very young place. About 15% of people are under the age of 5, and half of the people are under age 18. So it's very young. I don't know if it's the youngest territory in the world, but it's got to be close. And there's kids everywhere. It's impossible to not notice it. One of the things that really stood out was just how many children were injured while we were there and killed while we were there. The injuries that kids had to deal with were really crushing. The losses to families, the losses. It was just it was kind of an incredible thing to see the level of violence and the level of the extreme level of violence that there was. Um, yeah, it's hard to hard to put into words, to be honest.
What are some of the things that you saw that really stood out to you and impacted you while you were there?
There were a few things. I mean, the one, just overall, I think one thing was the level of deprivation in a lot of different ways. the incredible level of homelessness and displacement, the widespread malnutrition. Literally everybody, even like the healthcare workers, everybody was at pains to say like, don't remember me like you're seeing me now, and they pull out their phone and say like, this is what I used to look like. See, and everybody had lost a ton of weight. I myself, even though I brought a ton of food with me, I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. Um, so and literally everybody on the trip had the same experience, and almost everyone who's gone there, I think, has had the same experience. Um, that was one thing. Another thing was the targeting of healthcare workers was very, very apparent. Like, so for example, I was there March 25th to April 8th, like you mentioned. The last raid, the last Israeli attack on Shifa Hospital ended on March 31st. And so we actually had a lot of displaced people, displaced uh, healthcare workers from Shifa. And they all told us that when they were detained, it was after they left the hospital. The Israelis make you march single file out of the hospital, and they'd say, "You in the scrubs, you in the white coat, they were really like specifically after healthcare workers. It was very healthcare workers are supposed to enjoy a protected status under international law. They're supposed to be immune from attack, really, unless they're doing something that's just blatantly in the military sphere. And none of these people were. I mean, they're walking outside of a hospital in scrubs with their hands up, and that's what's getting them arrested and sent to some torture chamber. So that was pretty wild. But another thing, just to say something good, even though it can't last forever, but something good was the resilience, and not just resilience, but like the insistence of the Palestinians that their humanity not be lost was really impressive. The healthcare workers, for example, they hadn't been paid since October 7th because their salaries are paid by the PA in Ramallah, and when the Israel attacks Gaza, they cut off those salaries. So they haven't been paid, but they come to work anyway. Or like I mentioned, the ones from Shifa, they don't even live in the Khan Yunis, but they were arrested by the Israelis, and then when they were released near European hospitals. So they said, "Well, I'll go there and work," even though they're not being paid. They're not, Um, so I thought that was impressive. And then on top of that, even just regular people, the way they stayed in family units, the way they tried to maintain their dignity, their customs, their culture, their faith. I'm not Muslim. I'm not a religious person at all. But to see all of that was very impressive. It was really, really impressive. But that kind of thing can't last forever. Everybody in every society has some kind of limit.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that you were also in Ukraine and different other disaster and war zone areas. What was different about what you saw, like in Ukraine and all the other areas that you volunteered versus what you witnessed in Gaza?
Oh, Gaza's just a totally different thing. There's nothing like it anywhere that I've ever seen. Um, like number one, the targeting of the healthcare workers, that's totally unusual. The worst country in the world in armed conflict for attacks on healthcare used to be Ukraine. Now Gaza has overtaken it by an order of magnitude. The rate of attacks on healthcare facilities in Gaza is 30 times higher than it is in Ukraine. The second thing was the killing of children, the killing and the maiming of children. Again, if you compare Ukraine and Gaza, the rate of killing of children in Gaza, and I swear to God this is true, is 600 times higher than it is in Ukraine. And again, Ukraine was the
Wow.
worst conflict in the world for children in armed conflict. That's the comparison. And despite that, Gaza is 600 times worse. That's just outrageous. I mean, there's nothing that even compares to that. The third thing is the starvation. Like wars are all like. I'm quoting Alex DeWall, but he says wars are often starvation crime scenes, and that's true. But in this case, the starvation is absolutely deliberate. I mean, it's not. No, they barely make any attempt to hide it. The U.S. pretends that it's upset about it, but it's obviously not because it's funding it the whole way, and they could stop it with one phone call. It's just there's a lot of major differences, and I've never, and actually, a fourth thing that I should point out. I've never, just think about your own lives. Have you ever seen a small child who's suicidal? I'm talking about like a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. That's very, very rare. It's a common thing in Gaza now. That's very, very unusual. It just speaks to the level of incredible psychiatric distress that they've been subjected to. And not just, it's important to point out, not just since October 7th. Nobody who is under the age of 20 has had anything that could even remotely be considered approaching a normal life. I mean, nothing. Just war after war after war, hunger after hunger, deprivation after deprivation, and it's just never gone away. Nothing in Gaza has been normal since, certainly since for a very long time, nothing's been normal, but nothing's been even like somewhere where you could develop in any kind of normal way since like 2000. It's outrageous. How can you subject people to something for this long? It's just crazy.
Wow. I mean, a lot of us here, especially those on the panel and people that are listening, have been, reading about this, but to sometimes just hearing it from somebody who was on the grounds and witnessed this, it just really puts things into perspective. So I just wanted to ask you, I know you wrote a piece that in the New York Times that was headlined 65 doctors, nurses, and paramedics, what we saw in Gaza. Um, I was kind of reading about that and something about that they removed the CT images of the children with the showing the bullet wounds. Is that what happened with the CT images? Did they end up removing them
Uh,
from that art with the article or?
No, no, or I don't believe they removed them. I honestly couldn't tell you. I haven't looked at it since I published it, but no, I doubt they did because actually, so what happened is the article is based on a poll of 65 American healthcare workers who've worked in Gaza, because we wrote a letter to the Biden administration in July, and we said that we wanted. And in that letter, we said we saw children shot in the head, we saw widespread starvation, et cetera, et cetera. So the Times contacted me and they said we want to know exactly how many people saw these things because that's an important thing to know. And when you sign a letter, you can just sign the letter or not sign it, but it's hard to like say I want to modify the letter. It just doesn't work that way. So I said, yeah, great, that sounds good. So we put out we designed a poll. We polled 65 people who responded. And yeah, so it's so the but the this it was a totally manufactured stupid controversy. Of course they had to find something to badger about, but the at the top of the article there were three. They're not really x-rays, they're what are called CT scout images, but it doesn't matter. For the layperson they're an x-ray. There were three x-rays of children with bullets in their heads or their necks. And the Times chose those because they're striking, and you look at it and you say, "Holy crap!" That's like I'm a trauma surgeon, so I'm used to seeing such things. But I think a layperson looks at them and says, "Oh my God, that's obviously a child's head, and that's obviously a bullet in a child's head." So people started saying that these are fake, they're made up, they're doctored, just it came up with any sort of stupid excuse. They're perfectly real. I have the full CT images. I have the gunshot. I have actual photographs of the children with like their actual wounds. But no, as far as I know, the Times didn't take it down. Actually, it became such a big, stupid controversy that the Times actually had to issue a statement about them. And so they said, "Look, we sent it to a whole nother round of independent experts in pediatric trauma and radiology, and they all said these pictures. There's no reason to think that they're faked."
Yeah,
So I
I
mean,
did read
it's
that.
just dumb.
Yeah, I did read that they thought that it was fabricated and that it wasn't real.
Yeah. Yeah, if
It,
anybody wants to see the actual if anybody's curious, I don't think we'd have the way to do it now, just on the phone. But if anybody's curious, there's a YouTube channel. There's a guy on YouTube. His name is Noam Dworman, Dworman. If you watch his, I only know because I've had to refer people to it like 1,000 times. If you go to the video where I had an interview with him, and you go to the 1 hour 30 minute mark, it starts right there, and you can see the full CT scan, and you won't be confused anymore as to whether it's real or not. I assure you.
Yeah, if you guys haven't read the New York Times piece, please make sure to look it up. It's called 65 it's headlined 65 doctors, nurses, and paramedics, what we saw in Gaza. And so Dr. Sidhwa, you also mentioned the open letter that you spearheaded to the Biden administration. And that was signed by 99 US medical professionals who served in Gaza, testifying to the unprecedented scale of the healthcare catastrophe and calling for an immediate ceasefire. What was the response that you received, if any, from the administration?
Oh, nothing. Not even an acknowledgement of the letter, actually, which I was kind of surprised by, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, no, it's funny because we set up a little website, GazaHealthcareLetters.org, so that if somebody wanted to tell the president and the vice president, like, hey, please, because what we called for in that letter was a meeting with the administration, saying, meet with us. We're almost 100 physicians talking to you and saying that we all saw quite awful. Crimes being committed with our own weapons. I can't think of a time when 100 people, 100 healthcare professionals, have written to the president of the United States about anything and gotten no response, let alone about war crimes being committed with our money, our weapons, etc. But people go to that website and they email Harris and Biden, and then they get an automated response, and sometimes they forward me the automated response, and they say, "Oh, can you believe they just sent this stock response?" And I say, "Well, it's more than I got after the letter." And I've reached out several times, no response.
Well, that says a lot. I mean, we're not going to get into too much of the political aspect, but I mean, that's just the fact that no response at all just kind of screams everything that we need to know about that. So my other question is, tell us more about, I know we spoke about this earlier, but 9-year-old Jury that you treated while you were there.
Yeah, Yuri, she's a sweet little kid. The She illustrates a lot of what's going on with Gaza pretty well. So, like you said, she was a 9-year-old girl. About 2 weeks before I met her, the home that she was staying in was bombed. She lived in Khan Yunis, which is the second, like Gaza's kind of shaped like this. Rafah's down here, and Khan Yunis is right here. So she was from here. Israel said everyone has to evacuate, so they moved down here to Rafah with her, where her grandparents lived. So they went to the grandparents' home. Mom and dad went out to find food, everything that their kids needed to survive. And when they came back, the home had been destroyed. I don't know if it was a house or an apartment building or what, but so I believe four of Jury's siblings went to another hospital, and Jury came to our hospital. So this little girl shows up in the preoperative area, and the nurse says, "Can you operate on her?" I said, "Well, I don't know who she is, so no, I can't operate on her." But I looked at her and she was dying. She was clearly dying of sepsis. Excuse me, she was dying of septic shock. And it was obvious that she'd been injured, but I couldn't even examine her because she just screamed and she was completely terrified. She had sepsis, so her brain wasn't really working properly. All she knew what to do was scream. She was basically acting like a 1-year-old instead of a 9-year-old. And so, we managed to put her to sleep without killing her. And when we did that and we rolled her onto her side, we found these humongous wounds on her buttocks and on her left leg. The wounds on her butt were so bad that they actually cut through the lowest bones on her pelvis. Her left leg was missing about 2 inches of the femur, the bone in the top part of the leg, missing a bunch of muscle. I don't actually understand how her leg stayed attached to her. It's kind of miraculous. And these wounds were. Sorry, I know this is pretty graphic, but these wounds were filled with maggots. It was just awful. It was unbelievably bad. Uh, and so, you might ask, well, who the hell operated on this girl? Why was she in such bad shape? Well, the people who operated on her were medical students because there were no surgeons around, and the reason is because they're all dead or they've had to flee. So that's like one thing that it illustrates. It's just the destruction of the healthcare system, and like the fact Jury would have been fine if she had just had a doctor to take care of her, but she didn't. She had med students who, it's not their fault they didn't know what they were doing. They're not trained yet. So that's one thing that it illustrates. It also just illustrates the just horrendous level of the how powerful these bombs are that we're sending to the Israelis to drop on. These are the bombs we're sending, the bombs that the Israelis are using. These MK series bombs that are guided with these JDAM systems. These are meant to penetrate mountains and military barracks. They're not meant to be dropped on poorly constructed apartment buildings and tents. And it's just so you can understand why they cause such massive death and destruction. But anyway, so for the next 10 days, me and I'm trying to remember now, 5 or 6 other surgeons spent about 30 hours taking care of this girl, this one little kid. And we were able to. And over the course of about 10 days, like I said, we were able to get her healthy enough that she could start eating again and that she could be medically evacuated to Egypt. and that's where she is now. And I actually got a video message from her through the Palestine Children's Relief Fund the other day. I didn't recognize her. She didn't look like a dying little kid anymore. She looked happy.
Oh, alhamdulillah.
She
That's
was speaking.
amazing.
Yeah, and no, exactly. So that's great, but that's one kid, and there's literally tens of thousands like her in Gaza that need that kind of care. And just taking European hospital itself, it's different now because it was forced to close, and I think it's reopened, but I don't know what state it's in now. But when I was there, there were about 250 people that needed daily operative wound care, meaning like I had to take them from their room to the operating room, put them to sleep, cut away the wound, or just do something surgical to them. And there's 4 ORs. How are you going to take care of 250 people with 4 operating rooms? It's ridiculous. Like the scale of what's needed is just totally there's just no way to deal with it. I'm pretty sure if you took the best hospitals in the United States, just picked them up and dropped them right into Gaza, even fully staffed, fully supplied, I don't think they would be able to deal with the deluge of injuries that they have, and especially amongst children, because kids are way harder to treat than adults. They take a lot more resources. They need a lot more specialization. They need an ICU a lot more often. And it's just it's it's a tough situation. But yeah, jury really illustrated a lot of what was possible and what was not possible in Gaza for medical care. It's one of the things that you just realize, like, you can give all the money you want to medical NGOs, and if people can, they should, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Wow. Um, well, I'm really happy that she's doing, great. Alhamdulillah, she's recovered and that she is doing much better. That's amazing news. I'm just going to do about one or two questions before I open up to the panel and anybody else that wants to come up and ask any questions. Did you have any experience dealing with the Israeli military? And if so, what was your experience like?
No, I'm glad that I did not in Gaza. I did in the West Bank when I lived there, but no, I didn't have any in Gaza at all.
Okay, so in terms of like moving around, that was just organized maybe by who?
Oh,
Not
I see. Well, so yeah, so any movement. So basically, our trip to the hospital from Rafah and from the hospital back to Rafah, those were both coordinated with the Israeli military. The You do this thing called deconfliction. It's done through a smartphone app, and you request the leader of your team can request that the WHO requests that a route be deconflicted, which means, in theory, means the Israelis won't fire on it. And then you wait, and when that route on the map turns green, then you floor it because you only have 15 minutes to get on and off. And yeah, but other than that, and I mean, the drones were overhead continuously. There were explosions continuously, and literally continuously. There were explosions that knocked me out of bed. There were explosions that knocked stuff off of the OR table. Explosions that blew out the buildings on the windows, excuse me, on the third floor of the hospital. But I never directly interacted with the Israeli military. No.
okay. Um, and what inspired you to start humanitarian work overseas? I know you mentioned Ukraine, Haiti, Zimbabwe, and now Gaza. What inspired you to start this journey of yours or start this active work to help others overseas?
Yeah. So I went to the second Intifada broke out during my first year of college, and so it was a big political topic. And then 9/11 happened the next year, so that was just a politicizing time, and I got very involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict. In learning about it, took classes on it, blah blah blah, and I read a lot about it, and I ended up editing some books on the topic for University of California Press and for OR Books in London, and for the Institute for Palestine Studies in DC. Excuse me. So I wanted to see the conflict up close, so I went and lived in Israel for a year. I lived in Haifa, and I worked with a kind of an Arab Jewish cooperative that works with. It tried to solve intercommunal problems in Haifa between the Palestinian and the Jewish communities in Haifa, but also sometimes within Palestinian communities and within the Jewish communities as well. Haifa is Israel's only mixed city, so Jews and Arabs actually live next to each other, and you can imagine there's a lot of conflict. But while I was there, I would tour around in the West Bank, And I went to I would tour around, and I happened to go to Ahli. I'm pretty sure it was Ahli Hospital in Hebron, and say, sorry, there's this thing doing hearts on the
Oh, the
screen.
heart
Here.
is distracting.
I'm sorry, I've never been on TikTok before. That's like all
Oh
this
yeah,
this like
guys, I
barrage
was
of
trying to convince
information is
him to
very
make a
very
TikTok.
overwhelming.
We need, guys,
That's
put a
totally
one
fine.
in the chat. One second, put a one in the chat if you think Dr. Sidhwa needs to get a TikTok, because I was trying to tell him, I'll help you make an account, and that way you can start your TikTok journey. But he refused. Look at all the ones in the
Believe me.
comments. Everybody wants you. Look, we got a lot. There's more and more popping up. No, those are just little like appreciation gifts. So sorry if there was a
Oh,
little bit
gotcha.
of a
Okay.
distraction. But continue.
That's okay. But yeah, so I was at Awfully House, and I was like 20, probably 22 years old. And I went to Awfully Hospital, and there was a Physicians for Human Rights Israel delegation there, and there was a fellow from it that I think he was an orthopedic surgeon. Um, he pointed out to me, he said, look, if you, because I hadn't gone to med school yet, so I was thinking about it, and I told him that, and he said, look, if you would live the way that these Palestinians have to live, then and you would still be a doctor, then go to med school. Otherwise, don't be a doctor. And I thought that was interesting, but it didn't really, that wasn't what resonated with me so much, because I was like, I'm an American. I'm not going to have to live like these guys do. But this Israeli guy kind of inspired me, because he didn't he if he could have if he had just criticized Israeli policy from his living room, everybody would just nobody would have cared, right? He could say whatever he wants, but when he goes into the territories, that's a very different thing. Now he's really making himself an enemy of the state. He's making himself an enemy of a lot of people, and but he does it. And that was more the bag that I thought I would be in, because it's just I think when your own society is committing crimes, you have a responsibility to do something about them. Not everybody can go work in the Gaza Strip, and that's fine. But you have an obligation to do something that is commensurate with your position in society, your position in life. Um, and so I thought that that was an appropriate thing to do. So yeah, like you mentioned, I've worked in Ukraine, I've worked in southern Zimbabwe, I've worked in Haiti. I lived in Israel, but then I worked in the West Bank for about 6 weeks while I was still in medical school, and then I went to Gaza. Yeah, I think people should take account of what their government is doing in the world, and at least try to do something about it. And I don't think ours is doing. All right, do good
Yeah.
things too, but here we're doing some real bad stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all the amazing work that you are doing, and I will do. My final question before I open it up is, do you see yourself going back to Gaza anytime soon?
Yeah, I'd like to. I was hoping to go back in November. That the Israelis just banned. Um, it's hard to get exact numbers, but it seems like it was something somewhere between 6 and 8 Western NGOs from going into Gaza. So that's caused a big problem for people going over there, and the humanitarian sector just doesn't move quickly when it comes to employing people, and you're not employing, I'm not an employee, but gathering volunteers and things like that. The and So yeah, so I'm hoping I can go back to Gaza in January. But I'll get back there whenever I can. Now, whether or not the Israelis will let me back in, I honestly don't know, but we'll find out.
Well, I mean, hopefully you'll be able to go, and hopefully the circumstances will be much better than what we're seeing now. But first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for answering all of the questions and for sharing with us your story. I'm going to open it up to questions now from the panelists first, the people that we have here. I wanted to say salam to everybody that's joined. I know a lot of people were in the comments saying hello, salam. I wasn't able to respond, so salam to everybody that's here. Appreciate you guys. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello to everybody here. We have Kavi, you just joined, Alina, Smitty, Ask the Doc, and Pally Viking. Um, I'm gonna let anybody, whoever wants to go first. I know Alina, Kavi, you just joined, but if you want to go first, we can go just down the panel from there. If you are ready for a question, Kavi.
Yeah, actually I am. Hi everybody. Taz, this is an amazing live amazing that you organize it, and Dr. Feroze Sidhwa, thank you for all of your work. I have two questions actually. The first question I have is I did read the Gaza healthcare letters. I also did watch your Democracy Now! Video and also the recent New York Times article about the 65 medical professionals and what they witnessed. I guess my question would be, what do you say to the people who say the CT scans that were released are actually fake or not real CT scans?
Yeah, I got to be honest, and I know you're just trying to offer me a chance to respond to that, but I just don't want to keep talking about it. I'm a doctor. I know what a CT scan is. You people aren't, and you don't. It's kind of that simple. But if somebody wants to see a very clear, detailed explanation of it, they can, like I mentioned, go to that. Just search for Noam Dorman. I think it's called the Comedy Cellar. It's called Live from the Table. That's what it's called. And just search for my episode. I think it was the most recent one, and
Mm-hmm.
just skip forward to one hour 30 minutes, and you can watch it all there. I have to, and I don't mean to be. I don't. I hope you don't think I'm trying to tell you to stop talking or something. I just can't. I can't keep explaining something that I went to medical school and then residency and then fellowship for, what is that, 12 years combined, to people who think that they became ballistics experts on Twitter. It's like totally silly. And I think there's more
100%,
important questions
100%.
to answer.
Yeah, I agree with you. Another thing is, what would you want people on the outside to do? How do you think people on the outside can support medical professionals like yourself or people in Gaza as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, how can you support people in Gaza? I guess TikTok's probably pretty international, so I don't know if but I'm an American, so that's the audience that I'd usually talk to. Me personally, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Israeli, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Christian. I have as much to do with this conflict as somebody from Mongolia. That's not that's not why I'm involved in it. I'm involved in it because my country, the United States, is the number one driver of the conflict in Israel and Palestine. It's not that's very easy to see. So what people can do is we can try to stop our government from doing that. It's great to go work in Gaza. It's great to give money to organizations that are helping in Gaza. But the core of the problem is political. It's our decision to support the Israeli assault on Palestinian society. And that needs to stop. It just does. And there's a few reasons for it, even if you don't personally care about the Palestinians. Like, I have to be honest, again, I hope I'm not offending people by saying this, it's just the truth. I don't personally care very much about Palestinian nationalism. I think it's a perfectly just cause. I wouldn't argue with that, but it's not my cause. I'm not Palestinian. Um, but I don't see why my government should be involved in this extreme and violent suppression of it. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't, and it certainly doesn't make sense to me that my government should be involved in murdering children in order to keep it suppressed. So that's and I don't think anybody, I don't think you'll find an American who disagrees. I really don't. I think coming at this conflict from the standpoint of support the Palestinians is fine, and of course, I do. I went and did that, but but coming to it from the standpoint of let's just stop committing crimes. Let's not be criminals. I think there's more potential there for that, and that corresponds to the laws of the United States. There are tons and tons of laws. It's not just one. There's a bunch of laws on the books in American law, like not even international law, just American law, that do not allow the United States to transfer arms to violators of human rights. That's Israel to the like this like the definition of it. Like I said, the killing of children in Gaza is 600 times the rate of killing of children in Gaza is 600 times higher than in Ukraine. How can that possibly not be a violation of human rights? Like it's wild. Like it's just you don't even need to go investigate each individual case Because, could there be a justified case of a kid being killed? I mean, maybe you could find one, but that's just not the issue. There's no way that the way this war has been fought could possibly be justified. That's leaving aside the question of whether or not the war itself is justified, which it's obviously not. So I think people can support the Palestinians most by getting our boot off their necks. I really think that that's the most important thing, and the way to do that is to there's lots of ways you can do it. I certainly don't want to tell people how to act, but I think a very, very easy one is just badgering the hell out of your Congress people every day. It takes 15 seconds. You guys are all way better with your phones than I am. Just copy and paste the same letter Monday through Friday to your congressperson and your two senators and to the White House. It's real easy.
Yeah.
It's real easy, and then there's lots of other things you can do. I think more important than even engaging with your politicians is just organizing amongst yourselves. There's lots of groups that are working on these things. They're working very hard on it, but they don't have enough of a popular base to be successful. And with young people, who I'm guessing most of you are younger. I'm 42, so probably you're younger than me. With your tech savviness, with your knowledge of social media, with your ability to get through things like this, you can make a big difference, and you can make a big impact in these groups. Go find them. Go ask them how you can help, and then become leaders in the groups and take it from there.
Yeah. Last question I want to ask, if it's okay with everyone. I'm sorry. Oh.
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fine. Go ahead, Kavi.
Yeah, one last question. I'm so sorry. So I recently, when I was reading this UN Commission report that was released in the beginning of October, one of the points that was very shocking to me was when they said, they were quoting a doctor who said the essence of childhood in Gaza had been destroyed. So we talk about the physical traumas. What about the psychological and mental traumas, especially of children? Can you maybe tell us a couple of words to kind of just give us like an idea of the mental trauma, and how does one even move like forward? How does one even heal from watching their parents die or experiencing all of this physical trauma themselves?
Yeah, and this is I'm trying to remember his name now. He was a very famous Palestinian psychologist or psychiatrist, actually, who I think has passed away just of natural causes. But I wish I could remember his name. Sorry, but he actually coined a term called continuous traumatic. We talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. He talked about continuous traumatic stress syndrome, and he said post-traumatic stress disorder is when the stressor goes away. Like you went and fought a war and now you're back at home, something, or you experienced whatever kind of trauma and now you're free of that trauma. But he said that's not what happens to kids in Palestine. They're continuously traumatized, and this was well before October 7th. He was talking in the 1990s. So it's not something that's new in Palestine, but in Gaza, it's been turned up to 11. I mean, it's completely nuts now. The level of deprivation that children have been subjected to is really total. I think with the way you're correct. I think you're quoting him almost exactly. The essence of childhood has been destroyed in Gaza. That's true. It's really quite shocking. Everything that children depend on to grow and to thrive is gone. Their parents are gone. Their home is gone. Any safe space is gone. Any semblance of safety is gone. Any idea that they could be safe is gone. Food is gone. Right? Their schools are gone. It's really important to remember nobody's gone to school in Gaza since last October 7th. That's a year without school. This is wild. This is really wild. Their families have been just shredded. I mean, I can't imagine there's a kid in Gaza who doesn't at least have a cousin who's been killed. I can't imagine it. Just statistically, it seems unlikely. And I'll tell you this. I remember I don't speak Arabic, so it's very hard for me to communicate, especially with little kids there. They just can't be. Even the ones who've learned to speak English in the UN school, they're so traumatized they can't really be expected to communicate in English. But there was a woman, I believe her name was Arwa something, I can't remember her last name, but she was a CNN reporter, and now she runs an NGO that helps children recover from war-related trauma. And she was talking, I think she was talking to CNN actually, and she said she relayed the story of a mother in Gaza who was telling her about how her son is having all sorts of psychiatric problems. psychological problems after he saw, the way she put it was, after he saw her sister's head explode. And Arwa kept talking to this woman, and after a while, she realized this mom had also seen her daughter's head get blown off by whatever, however it happened. And at some point, this woman that she was talking to realized that she had also seen this. And so she stopped and she said, "Look, I know what you're going to ask me, but please don't, because I need to stay strong because I still have children who are alive." That's again, that's very admirable, and one can only be in awe of incredible such an incredible level of human dignity and resilience. But everybody has a limit, and this society has been pushed far, far, far past its limit. It's beyond. It's really beyond anything. But I think I mentioned at the beginning. It's very, very unusual to see children who are suicidal, and we quite literally saw that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mean like, oh, they're really sad. No, I mean they wanted to die. And I'm hardly the first person to point this out. Like MSF actually had a press release about it. Doctors Without Borders had a press release about it 2 months before I even got to Gaza. It must have been. So it's not the psychological trauma. And on top of that, there's another major issue with that. Not only have these children been traumatized for a year, but they've been starved for a year. So their development is not going to be normal. And if the Israelis were looking to create a generation of people who have major, intellectual problems, major intellectual difficulties, and are furious at them, they might have done it. It's not clear where it's not clear where this goes, and how like you said, how does one recover from this? I don't think anyone has ever tried to recover an entire society that is half children from this kind of trauma. I don't. It might be possible. It might not. It's certainly not possible under the current circumstances.
Thank you, Dr. Sidhwa. Thank you, Kavi. I hope he answered all of your questions. And if that's all you got, we'll go to Alina. Kavi. Oh,
Hi, doctor.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you for.
excellent answer. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Um, thank you for doing this panel. I have two questions. I'm sorry if my dog's making a lot of noise in the back. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So my first question is: I know that there's nothing that could possibly prepare anyone for being in a medical situation in Gaza, but what would you wish? Like, what do you wish you would have known prior to going there? And is there anything that you might have done differently if you get the opportunity to go again?
Um, in terms of the medical care, nothing really. Uh, Learn to speak Arabic before going, I suppose. But uh, yeah, no. In terms of the medical care, there's nothing that I would do differently. But the major issue is that like I'm a surgeon. I can't just like magically fix things with my hands. That's not how it works. We need equipment, we need stuff. And when we went through Rafah, we could take our stuff with us. Now we can't, because now that the Rafah crossing has been destroyed, the only way to get into Gaza is to fly to Amman and go through Israel and then Jordan, or go through the West Bank, then Israel. Gosh, go through Jordan, then into the West Bank, then into Israel, then to Gaza. And I saw some people who don't like me calling it Israel. Sorry. The But yeah, so when you do that, you're subject to Israeli restrictions, and that's why they can determine who goes in and out now, which is just completely nuts. There aren't very many people, or there aren't very many conflicts where the attacking party has complete control of the other territory. Like, the Russians can't control everything that goes into Ukraine. It's the Indians can't control everything that goes into Kashmir. The Moroccans can't control everything that goes into Western Sahara. But Israel does have literally total control over Gaza. I mean, it has for a long time, but now it's really quite extreme. So what I would change is, that the U.S. could easily force Israel to just let stuff in. That would take one phone call from maybe two senators, and the Israelis say, okay, we don't want to deal with this. Just let them bring stuff in, but they won't, because everybody is just that committed to this completely insane project of destroying the Israelis, or excuse me, of destroying the Palestinians. And actually, I would say in the process, I do think they're actually destroying the Israelis as well.
Mm.
Thank you so much for your answer. I did want to ask a question that, um, not to make light or not show the severity of the situation, but I'm not Palestinian, but in these communities, I've heard nothing but, and also felt nothing but, the hospitality and the welcoming
Yeah.
of like Palestinians on this app. And I would love to hear, if you do have a story of an encounter with somebody on the ground that was in one of these awful situations, but truly like showed you what Palestinian people are about as far as
Oh, I
resiliency
mean,
and like
oh yeah,
hospitality.
no shortage of them. There's no shortage of them. Just look at Shuri's dad, the little girl that I mentioned, the 9-year-old girl. That guy, he's a very slight man, very nice guy, probably a few years younger than I am. Unbelievably dedicated to his daughter. In the American media and just the Western media in general, Palestinians are presented with like something along the lines of the subtlety of like Godzilla or something like that. They're just these freaks of nature that walked out of the ocean and started destroying Tel Aviv for no reason. It couldn't be further from the truth. You also hear this constantly that they want their own kids to die. That's just I've never met people who are so fanatically attached to their children. Now, I mean it seriously. You cannot separate these people from their children. They go completely nuts. They really love their kids to a degree that I've just never seen in any other culture. And I can imagine they see them die all the time. So I can imagine where that comes from, but no, there were a lot. So like Jury's father, for example, he it was so when we never met him before we operated on her for the first time. Um, because we didn't know who she was, we didn't know where she came from. Literally didn't know anything about her. But once the operation was finished, we went and found her dad, and he was just at pains to thank us for taking care of her. We said that's not the issue, but what we explained is that now that we've gotten rid of the what was causing her sepsis. So now her brain will start working properly again, and she'll start waking up, and she'll want to eat more and things like that. So you have to be able to can you find ways of getting food, and like I gave her a lot of my own food too, which was fine. She hated it, she thought it was gross, but it was energy bars, but it was something, and so this guy would just scour Khan Yunis and you have to remember she's a 9-year-old kid, right? So she's very sharp, she was very intelligent, and it was very very clear that she knew that she could boss her dad around. It was great to see. It was so cute. And so we'd move for the next operations, the ones after those. We would roll her into the preoperative area, and she'd figure out what was going on, that she's going to get anesthesia and surgery again. And she'd start, I couldn't understand any of it. People had to translate for me, but she'd say, no, I'm not doing any more of this anesthesia nonsense unless you get me honey melon, and unless you get me phone calls with my siblings in the other hospital. And her dad would just promise her the world. I mean, he just, because all he wanted was for his daughter to be better. I'll tell you, that guy, I guarantee you that guy was not eating so that she could eat. I mean, he was thin. He had food in his room, but he did not eat it because he wanted her to eat it. It's very impressive. It's very, very impressive. Or like that story that the woman Arwa related to CNN. That's not a mother suppressing having to even deal with the fact that she saw her daughter's head blown off so that she can keep her other children alive and as safe as possible in such a horrendous situation. That's that speaks to the dignity and the humanity of these people. That's not it's not some, or actually another story that I'll tell you. Uh, that I just found was incredible. When I was in the hospital, the hospital itself was a displaced persons camp. So on the grounds of the hospital and even inside the hospital, there were tents for displaced families that they had just constructed from, oh, pardon me, sorry, that they had just constructed from the destroyed remains of their house or somebody else's house. And they all had numbers and letters on the side, and I couldn't figure out what they were. I said, what are these? Well, then towards the end of the trip, I got the chance to drive through Rafah. And not, I wasn't driving; I was just in the car. Drive through Rafah, then up through the Mawasi area, and then back through Khan Yunis. And all throughout, I saw the same thing on the tent. So when I got back, I asked one of the guys in our our group. He was an Iraqi and Jordanian neurosurgeon. I asked him, I was like, "Allah, what are these designations on the side of the tent?" So we went and asked somebody. It was absolutely amazing. The Palestinians completely spontaneously, because you got to remember their government just ceased to exist after October 7th. It was driven completely underground. The Palestinians just spontaneously came up with a way to organize these camps, because there's literally everyone, virtually everybody lives in one of these camps now. So the every tent gets a designation, a number, and a letter. There's maybe, I can't remember how many tents per person, but there's one person dedicated to a certain number of tents, and they're responsible for updating every day. Is there a person with disabilities in the tent? Is there a person who needs surgery the next day in the tent? Is there this? Does this tent still have flour? Who can they borrow flour from? It's just an incredible level of social organization. And just imagine if what has been done to Gaza were done to, like, where I live. I live in Stockton, California, and Americans would be, cutting each other's limbs off and cooking them over fires to eat. Like, this level of social cohesion is just incredible. And again, it's because they've had to. Like, and it's a big part of the culture too, to be sure. But they've had to. This is the only way these people have been able to survive for decades, literally for decades. And yes, again, it's taken up to 11 now. But yeah, so I think the society is extremely impressive. I do. Yeah, it's got bad people in it, just like any other society. Nobody doubts that. But the level of the level of love, and not just love, but dedication, just raw dedication to one's children, to one's family, to one's culture. Again, I'm not a religious person, but to one's faith. I think is very impressive, and I really have never seen anything like it. I honestly doubt I'll ever see anything like it again. It's shocking.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Once again, I don't want to make any light of it, of the situation. I just think that, these kinds of stories are so amazing to further
Yeah.
humanize the Palestinian people and their
Yeah,
cause.
no, Alina, I totally agree with you. Like I said, the Palestinians are just presented in the American media as if they're Godzilla or something. Like, I mean that seriously. There's no subtlety. There's no reason. There's no rhyme or reason to what they're doing. They're just walking out of the water and slaughtering people. That's not what's happening. It's a society that's been pushed to some very extreme levels, no doubt about that. But there's a long history. It's not terribly complicated to understand it. Um, and yeah, for anybody who wants to understand it, there's plenty of standard text on the book, on the conflict, that you can read. Um, and you don't even have to go to exotic sources. I mean, the mainstream sources can explain to you very clearly what's going on.
Thank you, Elena. I don't know if you have any more questions, but if not, we will, yeah, as long as he answered all your questions. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll go to our next panel guest. We have Smitty. Welcome, Smitty. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation, Taz, and Doctor. This is an incredible live, and I'm just honored to be able to ask you these questions and learn about your experience, and albeit an incredibly tragic situation. Today, on the 28th of October, South Africa submitted roughly a 500-page document to the ICJ detailing their case in regards to the genocide case against Israel. And, as we dissect this document, I believe we're going to see a lot of discussion around the medical system in Gaza. And so my first question is, can you go into maybe a little bit of detail in regards to the state of the medical system, the infrastructure in Gaza, and, what might need to be done to, when this is all over, to help rebuild?
Yeah, it's unfortunately a very, very bleak picture. I didn't know South Africa had submitted a fourth petition. That's good to know. Thank you. Um, for people who don't know, South Africa submitted. Do you know SoCal, Smitty? Do you know if I can't remember when their first one was submitted? I think it was November or December. But do
Yeah,
you
in
remember?
December. Yeah,
It
so
was
it was
December. Thanks.
yeah, so it was in December, and then what they submitted today was so today was the deadline for the written arguments that they're going to present. So they submit today. Israel then gets about 6 months or so to respond, and then
Yeah.
the case will start in like late 2025, early 2026.
Yeah, yeah. So what he's referring to is the case against Israel brought by the government of South Africa, or I should say the state of South Africa, under the Genocide Convention. It's called the full name of it is like the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, something like that, which has to be the most oddly worded convention that's ever been written. But nevertheless, it's a sensible thing. And what they argued is that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. They've been arguing this since December, and it's not hard to see that they're probably right. I don't know if they'll actually win the case. That's a different matter. That has to do with a lot of political stuff. I saw somebody in the little rolling thing that's here said, "Wow, they get 6 months to respond." Actually, just so you know that's what I was going to get to. The court has actually repeatedly ordered Israel to stop committing genocide in Gaza. The way they worded it is again the way that it's worded is unbelievably bizarre. What they say is that the state of Israel must act to prevent genocide from being carried out in Gaza, as if the state of Israel isn't the entity carrying out itself. But regardless of that, so this is now the fourth iteration of this petition. And if it's the written arguments, yeah, it would make sense that it's about 500 pages long. But getting to your question, the level, so I kind of think of any society in like three levels. The base level, the most basic and simple thing at the bottom, is housing and what's called wash infrastructure, water, sanitation, and hygiene. Basically sewage and potable water, right? At the next level, you've got healthcare, and at the level above that, you've got like universities, higher learning, industry, things like that. Well, that top level is gone. Like completely physically obliterated. Every industry, every bakery, literally every bakery in Gaza has been physically destroyed. Um, every university has been physically destroyed. Almost all of this is not during fighting, by the way. This is all during controlled demolitions after fighting has stopped. Um, and a lot of the houses, a lot of the hospitals have even been physically destroyed. But then there's healthcare. Healthcare has been so severely compromised that every surgical infection I made got, or every surgical incision I made got infected. There are no truly functional hospitals in Gaza anymore. It's if you watch the news, you see that there's 36 hospitals in Gaza. That's not really true. There's really four. There's four buildings in Gaza that anybody would think of as a hospital, meaning you or me. That anybody who doesn't live in Gaza would think of as a hospital. There's only four. It's Shifa, which is basically gone, Indonesian hospital, which is basically gone, European hospital, which was largely destroyed, but I don't know how severe the destruction was of the equipment and things like that, and Nasser Medical Complex. We're kind of going in this rotation now, where only two out of those four are even accepting patients at any given time, um, because they're under siege, and and even when two of those four are open, they're basically useless. It's just not. They are buildings where there are doctors and nurses inside, but like I said, you can't do surgery just by having a surgeon around. You need equipment, you need anesthetics, you need all sorts of stuff, and they're just not available. And then, but so that top part of society has been destroyed. The middle part has been destroyed, but even the lowest, sorry, everybody, even that lowest level, housing and wash infrastructure it's destroyed. It's gone. Something like 70% of the housing stock in Gaza has been destroyed. Sorry, I'll keep talking. I just gotta get some more water. I've been doing interviews all day, so my voice is gone. So something like 70% of the housing stock has been destroyed. 80. If you read, there's a really good report about this from Oxfam called "Water War Crimes." You can download it. It's free. And they point out that 80, if I'm remembering the number right, 85% of the water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed. That's things like water treatment facilities, toilets, sewage plants. There are zero, and I mean literally zero, functional sewage plants in the Gaza Strip right now. It's not that hard to figure out what happens to people when you make them homeless, when you leave them malnourished, you displace them repeatedly, you make them live on a beach, which is literally what the Mawasi area is. That's Israel's so-called safe zone. And then you flood them with sewage. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to die of starvation and disease. The level of destruction in Gaza is so extreme that the UN Environment Program, this was months ago now, the UN Environment Program estimated that it would take 15 years to clear the rubble, not to rebuild, to clear the rubble. Okay? They estimated that there's 107 kilograms, I don't know what that is, 200 pounds, something like that, a little bit more. There's 107 kilograms for every square meter of the Gaza Strip right now. How is that going to get rectified? How do you clean up after something like that? It's literally a generations long project. On top of that, the rubble is contaminated with human remains drastically. There's the number that's cited in the thank you, 214 pounds. The number that's cited in the media is that there's 10,000 people thought to be buried under the rubble, but that's been since like January. The numbers never changed. There's Theodore Postal, who happens to be MIT's leading missile specialist. He estimates he says he can't put a finer number on it. He estimates that hundreds of thousands of people are buried under the rubble. I don't know if it's true or not. It's very hard to know, but but the rubble is contaminated with human remains and also with a huge amount of unexploded ordnance, unexploded Israeli military ordnance. So the cleaning up Gaza after this, it's going to be a Herculean project. Like I said, UN Environmental Program estimates 15 years just to clear the rubble away. So again, this level of destruction of a society, it couldn't possibly be justified by anything, like literally by nothing. It's just, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking, incredible. The adjectives to find to describe it are, escape all of us.
We're quickly running out of them. It's true.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. My final follow-up question is: can you talk a little bit? One of the things we hear about also, and probably not enough, is the amount of kids, especially, that have had to go through, amputation surgeries and now obviously having to live a life without limbs, and how impactful that is just on a daily basis, and anything we can do to support that group of people who now have to live in that way. Is there anything we can do, and just how is daily life for folks that have to live without a limb?
Anything you can do right now, not much in terms of helping them to live in Gaza. But one thing that maybe I can explain, so let's go back to Juri. She's a good example. Juri's sciatic nerve was cut. It's the main nerve that goes down the back of your leg, and which basically makes her leg useless. So she's probably they'll try and repair it and then et cetera, et cetera. But she's going to need, let me put it this way, if someone is able to repair her sciatic nerve and she actually gets function back in her leg, she's going to need, and I'm not exaggerating about this, something like 12 to 20 operations in her life done by pediatric orthopedic specialists, of whom there aren't that many in the world, to ever be able to walk again, to ever even be able to get to the point that she could start trying to walk again. That is not doable in Gaza in the next 150 years. Like, there's just no way. Like, no matter how fast somebody rebuilds the healthcare system, there's no way it will be rebuilt to that level of subspecialization. So she needs to be evacuated not to Egypt, but to the U.S. or Europe. So there are groups that are doing things like that. So one is called the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. They're actually the ones that got me the video of Juri. Another is called Heal Palestine, I think, HEAL Palestine. Um, there are several groups that bring children, especially children, because it's just easier than bringing adults, um, to the U.S. and to Europe, and also to Qatar, where they have some pretty advanced care to for care. So the point is that like almost all of these children who've had amputations since this war started, leaving alone the previous wars, the Great March of Return, all sorts of other high amputation events. These children they're nowhere near ready to get prosthetics. What they need is surgeons who know what they're doing and a clean environment and an actual amount of food that they can eat so that they can actually heal and continue and can get back to growing. That's what they need right now. And unfortunately, right now, the only way to do that is to get them out of Gaza.
Thank you for that answer. Appreciate it. And once again, thank you for your time. This has been incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Smitty. Thank you. And next we have Ask the Doc. Salam, Doc. If you have any questions, it's
Yeah,
your
definitely,
turn.
Taz. Definitely. Walaikum assalam, Taz. First of all, thank you for hosting this. This is such a productive live and very refreshing, actually, and much needed. And I hope we can have more lives just like this. And to Doctor, thank you so much for your work. We appreciate that on behalf of the Palestinian community. A lot of good questions have already been asked. I wanted to ask specifically about you and your experience. How has this experience affected you, and has it affected you differently than other missions that you've gone on in the past? And how do you maintain a positive outlook and positive mental health?
Yeah, no, I like I said before, I'm a trauma surgeon, so I'm used to dealing with people dying. That's not. It's. I wouldn't say that the. And just to be clear, I'm unusual in this regard. Everybody else who has been over there has been very, very deeply affected by it, and for good reason. But I've been reading about this conflict for a very long time, so I knew the dire straits that Gaza was in before. I'm talking about before October 7th, and then after October 7th, obviously I was reading everything I could about it, just kind of like everybody else was. But I'm a doctor. I have a Master of Public Health, so I'm mostly reading the medical, or not mostly, but I'm reading a lot of the medical literature, the in-country reports from the World Health Organization, things like that. So I knew how bad the situation was before I went there. But I'll tell you, and then I mean this really, actually, if you want to see what the mental health of physicians who've worked in Gaza is like, if you go to, there was a group called the Uncommitted Movement or something like that. It was a political group within the Democratic Party. A lot of you probably know more about it than I do, but they organized an event at the DNC, the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and they asked us to come speak as physicians who've worked in Gaza. So we did. We went there, and of course the DNC pushed us to literally, as far as I can tell, literally the room that was furthest away from the main stage in the entire convention center. But still, people found out about it. Like I always pronounce the poor man's name wrong. I really need to learn how to say it. But Ta-Nehisi Coates, or is that his name? He was there. Andrew Coburn from The Guardian was, or not from The Guardian, from some paper in London was there. So there were people there. Democracy Now! Was there. But if you want to see what the mental health care of Gaza's workers is like, go watch that press conference. They're all crying. I mean, literally, they're crying while recounting what it was like in Gaza. There's one point at which when I was speaking, and I said, I can't remember the exact words. It was something like, I wish you could see the nightmares that I was actually reading a speech from Dr. Perlmutter, who couldn't be there, so he just wanted me to read his speech up. And I said, I wish you could see the nightmares that plague so many of us of something like, I can't remember the exact words, but something like maimed children or murdered children and their mothers staring at us, silently asking why we didn't save them. There's a woman named Tanya, a pediatric critical care intensivist, so she's also used to seeing children die. When she heard that, she starts tearing up and has to walk off the camera. That it's not a, I mean, not that anybody here was saying it's a joke, but yeah, no, going to Gaza was not, it wasn't a joke for most people, for sure. It was very, very, it impacted them a lot. And I'll tell you, that's why so many people so many of we're doctors. We don't like doing public things. Like I really wish I was just building furniture in my garage right now. But after you see these things, you kind of can't. You just can't go. You can't walk away from them. And just to emphasize, like I lived in Israel for a year after I graduated from college. Like I said, I was working with a Palestinian Jewish cooperative there, and it's not. I very much fear for what this is going to do to the Palestinians, or what it already has done to the Palestinians. But it's it's very scary what it's doing to Israeli society as well. And you can see what it's doing. It's driving the Israeli society off a cliff. I mean, a lot of these people are going nuts. Like right now. So I'm sure a lot of you saw this. At the Sderot Yemen torture camp, and that's what it is. It's an Israeli torture camp in the Negev Desert. There was a moment, maybe 2-3 months ago now, maybe a little bit more than that, where there were 9 Israeli soldiers accused, quite literally, of raping Palestinian detainees. They were sodomizing them with rifles. Okay, and there was almost no attempt to hide this there, none. And it actually only came to light because one of them was hospitalized afterwards because he was bleeding so badly. This is obviously disgusting behavior, and this is insane, right? This is just straightforwardly terrible. There isn't a person on the planet who would disagree, except for the Israeli media. And apparently the feeling was so widespread that why shouldn't we just let them do this? Apparently this feeling was so widespread that when the military police went to arrest those 9 soldiers, so they showed up at a military detention center in military uniforms to arrest military people, a crowd of civilians spontaneously formed to stop the soldiers from being arrested. The military police negotiated with them. They said, okay, look, we won't arrest them, but they can't stay here because there's prisoners here. So we're going to take them to a base in the West Bank where it's still a military facility, but there's no prisoners. So at least they can't keep doing this crazy stuff that they're doing. When they got to the next base, a new crowd had formed. And this time it included uniformed soldiers, and it even included Israeli Knesset members saying, how dare you arrest our soldiers? And after this, these soldiers kind of became, not all of them, I don't know, but just 1 or 2, became celebrities on Israeli television. Is that a healthy society? I don't think so. And I'll tell you, there are plenty of Israelis actually who recognize this. Like probably people have seen just yesterday or maybe the day before, The Guardian published a call from 3,000 Israeli activists. It was 2,000 at the time. Another 1,000 have signed it, not just calling for a ceasefire, but calling on the international community and specifically the United States to impose sanctions on Israel. That's pretty wild. And furthermore, that's totally illegal. A lot of them are probably going to be arrested and charged with treason after doing that. So it's not some joke. It's not like they just get away with it for free or something. A lot of them live out of the country, but a lot of them don't. And on top of that, 150 Israeli physicians sent me a letter that they sent to the Biden administration. They didn't even bother sending it to their own government because it's so crazy. 150 Israeli physicians sent a letter to the Biden administration saying that they support our letter, which calls for an arms embargo on Israel. So, the situation in Israel is quite desperate. I think people who have a brain and haven't gone nuts with this kind of insane nationalist fervor are very frightened by where their society is going. So that's why, sorry, I can't even remember what you asked me that got me on this tangent. But when people talk about being pro-Israel, I don't think that's what they're doing. I think anybody who I think anyone who thinks that sending Israel more bombs, more weapons, and exactly like somebody just said, turning them more into moral bankruptcy than they already are, It's that I don't see that as pro-Israel. I see that as anti-Israel and anti-Jewish as you could possibly be, and that's what the U.S. is right now. And actually, I'm not the only person who thinks this. Lily Greenberg Call, she was a young woman who resigned, I believe, from the Department of Interior, but she was a Biden political appointee, a young Jewish woman. Lily Greenberg Call was her name. She wrote in her letter, she publicized her resignation letter. She wrote that the Biden administration, I think I'm quoting her almost exactly, the Biden administration is making American Jews the face of the American war machine. Yeah, she's right. It has nothing to do with being pro-Jewish or pro-Israel. It's quite the opposite, in my opinion. We're turning Israeli Jewish society into a bunch of, I mean, I don't even want to use the historical analogy because it's so awful. It's true, though. It's wild. And again, none of that compares even remotely to what's being done to the Palestinians. I'm not trying to say that they're the same thing. They're not. The Palestinians are being physically destroyed and we're murdering children en masse in Gaza. But so that they're not equivalent to each other at all. But it does give kind of an opportunity for engagement with a very important constituency in the United States, which is the Jewish American constituency. And furthermore, if you look at polls, you can see that they're not really in favor of this anymore. They might have been after October 7th. I shouldn't. No, they're not one group of people, obviously. But I think if I remember the polls right, apparently, I think about 40% of young Jewish, young American Jews, probably just meaning younger than I am, 42, young American Jews, 40% believe not only that what Israel is doing in Gaza is wrong, but that it's genocidal. So, I mean, that's a huge opportunity for engagement. And I don't know how many of you are college students or not, but on the college, the campus protest that happened last year, the encampments, there were Jews everywhere. There are young Jewish Americans everywhere, and because they're just disgusted by this. They don't want any part of this. So we have, I'm sorry, again, I forgot the question already, but we have lots and lots of opportunities for major engagement and to make major inroads against even mainstream politicians with all this information. But it has to be publicized, and people have to talk about it, and it has to be. We have to not be afraid to suffer the consequences of talking about these things.
Doc, I don't know if you wanted to ask
Yeah.
another question, or if he
No,
answered your question.
yeah, definitely. No, I just love listening to you speak, to be honest with you. And and I was just wondering, like, what is your normal audiences that you speak to, and how can we? Because TikTok, it reaches such a diverse audience, and it's just limitless. And I'm just wondering how we can amplify your voice even more. I do think you need a TikTok account, but how can we help
I
you?
told him.
How can we help you? How can we amplify
Well,
your
it's not how you
voice?
can help me. It's I'm like I said, I'd rather just be building furniture in my garage. But you can help again. Are you an American?
Yes,
Yeah. So
I'm
you can
also a
help your.
physician myself.
Oh, really? Oh, that's what do you
Yeah.
do?
Internal medicine.
Oh, rock on, man. That's great. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you can help your own society, and you can help Palestinian society, and you can help Israeli society, and you can help the whole world by just getting the U.S. to follow its own laws. We shouldn't forget about that. No one's calling for anything radical here. Like, I'm not calling on the United States to invade Israel and dismantle the Zionist entity or something like that. Some people might like that. Okay, fine, but I'm not in favor of it. And for of course, obviously not going to happen. But we're calling on the United States. Keep in mind, Kamala Harris, who is running as the Democratic presidential nominee, she's an attorney general. She's a lawyer by training. Donald Trump's just a nutcase, but she's an attorney general. She was the AG of California for a long time. That's how she built her career. So this person can't figure out that the law is supposed to be followed. That's a very easy sell politically. And I honestly think that's why that's why the Times piece, the way we frame, the New York Times piece was, this is what 65 American doctors, nurses, and paramedics saw in Gaza. and then this is what it means. And what it means, and what I said it means, maybe I'm wrong, but what I said it means is that the U.S. is just not a country of laws anymore. And actually, the last line of the Times piece is that we need to stop arming Israel, but then that we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves. And that's right. You got to remember, Gaza is not the only place in the world where we're doing stuff like this. Okay, like it's just not. It's unfortunate. It's the most extreme example, to be sure, and by a wide margin right now. But there are plenty. There's a lot of other places in the world where the United States has done very similar things. Ask somebody from Vietnam. Ask somebody from East Timor. Ask somebody from Guatemala. Ask somebody. It's not subtle. It's a very, very long and very ugly history after World War II. So and it's also important to realize, if what happened in Gaza is allowed, if there aren't major consequences to this, either in the international system, either from changes in American foreign policy, whatever it might be, not only is it going to happen again in the West Bank, just maybe more slowly, and then of course something like October 7th is going to happen again, and it's just going to be another excuse for another major round of carnage. Because again, people will only tolerate these things for so long. It's hardly surprising. The same thing will be done in the West Bank, but then think about, there are plenty of other places in the world where there are Muslim minorities, where people would like to get rid of them. The major one is India. If India continues down its path, and remember, India and Israel are major military allies now. This is, and actually somebody just, I think, is trying to point out that the U.S. might actually, you could do the same thing. If God knows what happens if there's another. I mean, I don't think a Harris administration is going to be all that much better than a Trump administration, but nevertheless, Donald Trump is much more of a lunatic. If he gets into power and he starts, if that leads to, I don't think it would happen in his administration, but if that leads down a path that leads the United States down some sort of, fascist route, it's very scary. It's very, very scary. So we can't be passive, like you're saying about this, like you're saying we can't be passive. We have to work and we have to do things. And I think somebody else asked before, it doesn't have to do with helping me. It has to do with getting out into your local community, learning who these people are that are working. No matter how, unless you live in a town of one person, there is somebody working on this. Okay. And if you live in a town of one person and there's nobody working on it, then that's your fault. What you got to do is get out there and just find people. The activist community is very small, and you can just email people. They'll get back to you. It might take them a while because they're also working, but they'll get back to you. You just have to get out there and do it. You need to, and furthermore, you have to educate yourself. One thing, I know I'm on TikTok, so I shouldn't say this, but one thing that you really have to do is you have to get off social media for at least long enough to read a book about this. If I was to recommend one, it would be Noam Chomsky's Fateful Triangle. But there are plenty. Anybody who doesn't know, just message me, and I can give you plenty of examples. You don't have to go to exotic sources. You don't have to fly some book in from Syria and get it translated from Arabic. The mainstream sources explain this conflict very well, because it's just not complicated. It's really not. And so, yeah, just educate yourself. You don't have to read everything on the internet. Excuse me. You don't have to read the whole internet. You don't have to read all 50,000 books that have been written on this topic. You just have to read one or maybe two. And then, of course, if you're interested, you can read others for sure. But just read one or two books, and then get back on social media. You'll have a much better understanding of what you're listening to, of how the information that's coming at you, actually what it means. And yeah, that website, ifamericans.knew.org, is a very good one for sure. But again, even then, you can't learn. You just can't learn about this conflict from like one article. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. You're talking about about 150 years of relevant history. Got to read a book. Sorry. I know it's the modern era, but books still matter. And so, yeah, so that's what you can do. You can educate yourself by reading something, and then you can go out and you can find people who are working on this problem or any of the other problems in the world, and you can talk to them and figure out what you can do. And there's no shortage of things that need to be done.
Thank you, Dr. Sidhwa. Doc, did you have any other questions? I don't know
Oh,
if you're there.
last one. This is probably a yes or no. Um, some of this medical stuff that you've documented, has it been used or given to South Africa to help them prove their case of genocide?
I can't say I've given it to South Africa, but I have been interviewed about it by people who said that it would be made available to the International Court of Justice. I don't know if that is South Africa or not. I honestly have no clue. Just because I do so many interviews now, I have no idea. But I have given testimony to people who said that they were working with the ICJ. Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you, man. Thanks so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Guys, W
Um,
Dr. Sado in the chat one time, please. Thanks.
yes, Dr. Sidhwa. Thank you, Doc. I don't know if did you want to let people know about what you are also having real quick, Doc? Otherwise, I'll go to Dr. Knockout.
Whenever this is done and take your time, I'm sure it's going to be much longer, and that's fine. On my live, we're going to be doing Shahada and then some other stuff. So, yeah.
All right, thank you, Ask the Doc. All right, we'll go to Dr. Knockout. Salam, Dr. Knockout. If you have any questions, go ahead.
Sure. Salam, Taz. Thank you for hosting such an insightful live session. I really appreciate all the effort you put into making this a success. How you doing, Dr. Sidhwa, I think, or Sidhwa?
Sidwa,
Yeah.
yeah, just ignore the H. Yeah.
Okay. It's a pleasure having you here with us tonight. My
Thanks.
question is what are the main health issues that kids in Gaza are facing right now because of the conflict, and how are the healthcare workers dealing with those challenges in terms of medical and psychological needs?
Yeah, so this is an important point. We don't know. This is how scary Gaza is. We don't know if we are starving tens of thousands of people to death or not right now in Gaza. That's terrifying to me. If you look at maybe it's too long of a technical discussion, but there's a group, a technical monitoring group in the international community called the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, and if you look at their data, which is the only data that's available, and it's not very good certainly that's true, but it's the best that's available. If you look at their data, it's impossible to conclude that less than 62,000 people in Gaza have starved to death since October 7th. That's insane. That's more than are known to have died from violence. It's probably not, the violent deaths are probably much higher than is actually reported, but still, that's quite shocking. Gaza is only 2 million people. You got to remember, 60,000 people dying out of 2 million. That's terrifying. Um, that's a lot. I think that's what I'm not that great at math, but I think that's about 5% of the population. So what are the number one or what are the major healthcare problems? Nobody knows because the monitoring systems are all gone. It's completely impossible to know. For me, like I said, I'm a trauma surgeon. So when I was there, I dealt almost exclusively with injuries. And then injuries are a massive problem. There are at least 100,000 severely injured people in Gaza, who, they may have died in a tent somewhere at this point. The Yeah, Coco, that's right. 60,000. The only estimate that one can actually make is that 60,000 people have died of starvation. But this is the thing, you don't know until you go count, and no one can count right now. It's just absolutely wild that we don't. And just also remember that most of those deaths would be in small children. That's how starvation works. So we're at a point where we actually don't even know if we're starving tens of thousands of children to death or not because no one's bothering to count. You know how crazy that is? It's insane. Like no one's going to believe this when somebody writes a history about it and says, "Wait, what did they do? You couldn't let them go to that. That's incredible." But anyway, the major problems I and if I had to guess, I would say that the major healthcare problems are infections, but they're infections that are normally not a problem. These infections are being caused by, like we talked about before, the displacement. So everyone's living outside, displacement slash homelessness, whatever you want to call it, um, and the major malnutrition, and then the concentration of the population. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention before, in that same uh, human rights report called Water War Crimes. It's by Oxfam. They estimated that, so the Mawasi, like again, if Gaza is like this, the Mawasi is this area right here. It's just the beach. Like this is the Mediterranean Sea, and this is the Mawasi area. That's the 14% of Gaza that Israel has said people can live in anymore. It's just a beach. There's nothing there. There's literally nothing there. There's no electricity. There's no running water. Oxfam estimated that when there was 500,000 people in the Mawasi, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up, there was one toilet for every 4,130 people there. That's just outrageous. I mean, those numbers don't, there's nothing else like this in the world. So again, you can imagine no sewage system, no toilets, no showers, starvation for a year, and homeless. Infection is going to be a huge people. I mean, you might as well lock people up in a prison and not feed them and not let them leave. That's all this is. It just happens to be outdoors, which may be worse. It's completely nuts. So there are tons and tons of healthcare problems, but they all come back to the social and the societal problem, which is the displacement and the malnourishment. And those are such easily fixed problems. I mean, the U.S. the Biden administration sent Israel a letter on Sunday. It was the Sunday after my New York Times piece was our New York Times piece was published, and and I don't think the Times piece had anything to do with it. I'm sure they were planning on sending it before, but that was the day they sent it. And it was leaked to the Times of Israel afterwards. And Barak Ravid, he's an Israeli journalist. He put the whole thing on Twitter. What was I going to say? Sorry. That letter. In that letter, they said that it was addressed to Ron Dermer and Yoav Gallant. That's the Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister, which really just means the direct ambassador to the United States, and the Israeli Defense Minister. They didn't even bother sending it to Netanyahu. What they said is that Israel has 30 days, but needs to start immediately to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and they laid out a list of criteria. Now, those criteria are all nice. Like, it would be better if they did that and didn't do and. If they did improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza, that would be good, and it does mean less people would die. But it hardly solves the problem. Again, the problem is that the Israelis have decided what they're going to do to Gaza. In that New York Times piece, what I wrote is that the U.S. and Israel are turning Gaza into a howling wasteland, a howling wilderness. People probably don't understand. That's a reference to what we did in the Philippines in the 1800s. There was a famous American commander who told the American Marines there that they were going to turn a particular island, I think it was called Samar or something like that, into a howling wilderness. In other words, you're going to kill everybody. That's what they're doing. The Israelis have decided that they're going to do this. The U.S. is well aware. I mean, maybe not regular Americans. That's different. The truth is hidden from them on purpose. But the American government knows exactly what's going on. They're not idiots. They have access to way better intelligence and information than I do, and I can see it. So they know what's going on, and they've decided that, well, it's more important to have Israel as an ally than to keep the Palestinians alive. Okay, that's a political calculation. We don't have to accept it. And again, I'm sorry, I know you asked about what can we do about the medical problems they're having, but the truth is there's nothing we can do about it until the thing that's causing the medical problems goes away. And what's causing the medical problems is our arming of Israel. That's it.
Did you have any other questions, Dr.
No. Thank you, Doctor, for answering my question.
No,
I have no further questions. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Nakao. We'll go to Rima.
Hello, hello, Dr. Sidhwa. My family is in the area that you continue to mention. I'm here in the United States and I can't go to see them. But my name is Rima, and I really appreciate what you're doing. I don't have, maybe I do have just maybe 2 questions just for purposes of humanizing the Palestinians who have been dehumanized over the course of almost 100 years. I'm sorry. These lives are, if you ever catch me on another live, I'm usually yelling and screaming and debating. These lives are very difficult for me because all the information it's being laid out, and it's being put in such a way that is extremely beneficial, and I really appreciate it, Dr. Sidhwa. My first question is, did you ever feel in danger amongst the residents? Did you ever feel like you would ever be harmed by them? And I guess that would be a yes or no. And then my second question is what was your most touching story that you experienced, and what keeps you up at night? I'm sure there's not much that does, but what is one thing that will never leave you? And again, this is just to humanize the Palestinians. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so did I ever feel threatened by the Palestinians? No, in fact, quite the opposite. And I have to be honest, I can't really understand that. I think the Palestinians have something of a right to hate me. No, I know I went there as a doctor, and so yeah, good for me. But I'm still an American, and they know exactly who's paying for these bombs. They're not confused by that. I actually, I'll tell you the first. So when I went and lived in the West Bank, and where I lived with the Abu Hashish family, just outside of Fawar refugee camp. Musa, the dad of the family, was a field worker for B'Tselem. He's a Palestinian. He has a PhD in English literature, so he was fun to live with. And this was in like 2006 or seven. I can't even remember now. When I was with Musa, or when I was living there. Oh gosh, the story just fell out of my head that I was going to tell. It was about feeling safe. Ugh. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just forgot the story. It literally just jumped out of my head. But anyway, in Gaza, I'll tell you this one in Gaza instead. So no, in Gaza, I never ever once felt unsafe. But when I was in Cairo, so I just landed in Cairo and I was going over to Gaza. I was with Mark Perlmutter, and some of you might have seen him like on CBS News and stuff like that. He's a Jewish American. Uh, Orthopedic surgeon. He went to Gaza with me. We met there. We had never met each other before, but so we were in a van together. And Mark being Jewish, he said, I had to come here because of what's going on. And he was perfectly honest. He confessed. He said, I'm really just worried because I'm Jewish and I'm not he's not like an Orthodox Jew or something. He's not visibly Jewish, but the last name Perlmutter is a very standard American Jewish name, and he was just worried. He was like, maybe someone will be upset. And I told him, I said, Mark, I know you won't believe me about this, but you will never find less anti Semitism anywhere on earth than in Palestine. And I do not understand it. I genuinely don't get it. I have no concept of how that's true, but I swear to God it's true. And I'm not the only person that thinks that incidentally. Like Norm Finkelstein has said the same thing, where he's a pretty honest guy. If he's found Palestinians who hated him, he would have told you. He says, when I went to Palestine, I didn't expect this, but I was shocked. I have never found less anti-Semitism anywhere. These just and again, I got to be honest, I don't understand it. There's something unusual about the culture or whatever it is, because again, other people would not be that generous and that understanding. Oh, I remember the story I was going to tell. So I'd gone back to work in the West Bank after I graduated, after I finished my first year of med school. So it was like 2006 or seven, I think. And the first patient I took care of there was a young boy, I think probably at 12 or 13. He actually lived. He had been shot in one of his eyes, I can't remember, and the bullet had traveled straight back. So it hadn't crossed his brain, which probably would have killed him, but it had just gone straight back and come out the back of his head. And at Ockley Hospital, they had neurosurgeons, they had a good ICU, so they were able to take care of him. And he actually lived. But when I met his dad, everyone was sure he was going to die. And so I met him, and I was with another medical student who was Palestinian. Or actually a resident. He was a Palestinian who had done his medical training in Russia. And so he's there, and he introduced me. And I don't speak Arabic, but he said this is an American medical student who's come. And I thought for sure he would say, like, I don't want an American near me, near my son, or they did this, they pay for this. Why do they support this? All he said was "Salam alaikum" and gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. That's again that level of decency and humanity. I honestly, I maybe I'm making myself out to be a jerk or something, but I honestly just can't understand it. It's very, very remarkable to me. Actually, and more than once actually, Palestinians, whenever there's an American around in the West Bank, people want to talk about stuff, and people would talk about politics. It's not like they just said, "Oh yeah, the whole world's great." No, they understood what was going on, and so sometimes people would start having a political discussion, and somebody would say, "Why do the Jews do this? Why do the Jews do this?" And then one of their friends would say, and again they would do it in Arabic, but it'd be like, "La la, what is it? Mish Yehudi Yisraeli." Because when they say Jews, and when they say Yehudi, they know they mean Israelis because that's the only Jews around. So, but even then, these people had that level of understanding of like, oh no, this guy is coming from a country where Jews live and aren't insane and aren't destroying people and aren't committing genocide. So make sure you understand that that's not what you're talking. The level of sophistication, and the level of understanding of what it means to be humane and decent in this society is really it's really, again, I know I keep saying the same thing, but it's really beyond anything I've experienced anywhere else. And what kills me about it is it's so opposite the picture that's painted in there. I'll give you another example. When I was in Gaza, because I look like this, people can easily assume that I am Arab or Muslim or whatever. And so there were two, probably like 40-something-year-old guys. These were the only two people I had encountered the entire time that I thought could have been fighters. They weren't armed or anything, but they just had that look and that bravado about them. And nobody can doubt that the Palestinians are very religious, especially in Gaza, are very, very religious. So they came up to me, and it was all in Arabic, so I couldn't understand it. It took a long time for us to figure out, but they were asking me if I wanted to pray with them. Because again, it was Ramadan. It was is iftar the name of the prayer as well? I don't know, but the prayer that you do in the evening is that they were asking me if I wanted to join. Yes, that's what it was. They kept saying Tarawih, and I was like, I don't know what that is. Sorry. And so eventually they said, and so then I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not Muslim. And they said, oh, not Muslim. Like, that was the only English they could muster. And I said, oh, shoot, I'm going to really piss these guys off. And they just said, welcome, welcome. Again, kissed me on the cheek, went on their way. It's just not the society that it is. And because you're saying, the dehumanization of the Palestinians is extreme. It's very extreme. And again, on October 7th, it was taken up to 11, because even though what was done was very brutal, killing 800 civilians is not a small matter, but that wasn't quite good enough for the Israelis. So they had to invent stories about babies being cooked in ovens and babies being beheaded and women having their breasts cut off and women having their fetuses cut out of them and all sorts of absolutely insane nonsense. And again, that was made to make the Palestinians back into Godzilla, right? They're not human. They're just some force of violence in nature. That's not what this is. That's not who they are. And I hope people can appreciate that, because it's very hard. It's very, very hard. And it took me myself, I lived in Israel and spent most of my time with Palestinians while I was there. I've been back several times, blah, blah, blah. I've spent a lot of time over there. Even still, it's hard sometimes to get out of that mentality of like, oh, these people might be violent. Are there violent people in Palestine? Yeah, of course. There's violent people in every society. But that's not the Palestinians are. They're almost the opposite of the picture that is painted of them in the United States, and not just in the U.S., in the West in general. And it's really it's really pretty shocking to see how dramatic the difference is. Yeah, I don't know if I can't remember the other questions that you asked. Sorry, I don't know if that answered all of them.
It did. I thank you so much again, Dr. Sidhwa. I'm gonna follow you. تاز بدل غزة وبغزاوي أنا حنزل ماشي.
He doesn't. He actually doesn't have an account. This is my backup that he's using. I actually made this backup just for him. We are trying to get him a account. So maybe one day. I know with the social media, you got all this Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So I know it's overwhelming. So one day, hopefully, we'll get him onto TikTok. But thank you so much, Rima. I'm gonna kind
And
of
Rima,
just
I hope
keep
your
it.
family is. Rima,
Oh,
sorry,
go
just
ahead.
not to interrupt, but I hope your family is okay.
I
There's a woman here. I live about 60 miles east of San Francisco, and there's a Palestinian Christian woman here named Dina whose family, a lot of her family has been killed actually, and they were sheltering in the Church of Porphyrius, or if I remember the name correctly. Um, it's one other thing that we should acknowledge that is for some reason not brought up much in media is that the dehumanization of the Palestinians is not at all limited to Israel. It's very extreme here. It's to the point that the Biden administration doesn't even really. I don't think they even bother calling families when Israel kills them. Like there's like Rima has her family there. Actually, did Rima has anybody from your family been killed?
yeah. So we're almost at 100 now.
So see, like that's outrageous. Have you gotten a call from the president of the United States or anybody in the administration?
No.
That's outrageous. That speaks to it's not we again we need to take a look at ourselves. It is not at all reasonable that Rima's family is not considered human and not even worthy of a phone call to say, listen, like couldn't somebody get on the phone and say, listen, we have our policy and I'm sorry that your family was hurt, but they didn't deserve that. Just a simple acknowledgement. That's all it is. That even that's impossible. The U.S. government is so busy that nobody can call Rima and say, I'm sorry that more than 100 people in your family have been killed. That's wild. And it just tells you how much work we have to do.
Brother, thank you, Dr. Sidhwa. I'm
No,
gonna
thank
give
you. And I'm sorry, none of this is fair or good, but I promise we'll keep working until it's better.
Oh, I know you will. Thank you, brother, and I appreciate you taking your time and speaking to the masses. Salam, brother Anan. Salam, Dr. Nas. Salam to everyone on the panel. بدلي غزاوي بغزاوي يا تاز أنا حمزة.
Thank,
سامي.
thank you, Rima. I'm gonna kind of keep it. Oh, go ahead.
Taz, I just wanted to ask a quick question. Dr. Sidhwa, have you had any like heat from your employer or in the medical community just for your interviews or anything like that?
No, so I'm very very lucky in that regard. I work in a small community hospital in Inland California. Nobody cares. We're like I'm not at like Harvard or something, so nobody cares who I am. The uh, I have an elite education, but that's not just not I don't work in an academic setting. So where I am, it's actually kind of funny. I keep telling the hospital that there's going to be blowback about this, and they keep being like, "No, there isn't, Feroze. We don't know what you're talking about." Oh, somebody just wrote 209 stand up. That's great. The hospital, I keep telling them like, guys, you might get these phone calls or emails, and they were like, who cares if we don't care? What difference does it make? We'll get some emails from people who obviously don't live around here and wouldn't show up at our county hospital anyway. So yeah, it's fine. So but that is, I got, again, that is unique. I think as far as I can tell, it's literally unique. In terms of American medical professionals who've worked in Gaza. All of the rest of them, literally all that I know of, have faced workplace retaliation of some kind or another. Um, Now, I will say I was scheduled to give a grand rounds. Grand rounds is like an academic medical center has different departments. So medicine, surgery, I know you know, but other people might not. Medicine, surgery, pediatrics, whatever. A grand rounds is like a technical discussion about some topic to that department specifically. So I had a surgery grand round scheduled for UC Davis, which is one of the big academic centers just north of where I live in Sacramento. They canceled it like a week before it was supposed to happen, which is and for the most outrageous reason you can imagine. Instead of just being honest and saying, "Look, We don't want to have to deal with the fallout from this, so we're canceling it. Instead of that, you know what they emailed me and said? Well, first of all, they didn't even bother telling me. They told the guy who had put me in touch with them. So they didn't even bother telling me, which I thought was astonishing. You know what they said? They said we have to. We have lots of people at UC Davis who need speaking opportunities to advance in their academic careers. And I was like, "What? You don't have grand rounds every week? Like, what are you talking about? That's the dumbest excuse I've ever heard. It's just pathetic, I mean, these people are that's pitiful. I thought it was so obnoxious. And so, I wrote back to their chairwoman and I said, "Look, I won't say her name, but look, Doctor So and So, I'm just curious. Don't you think that's insulting? If you had been scheduled to give a talk for months." And then at the last minute, somebody canceled it because other random people need to speak so that they can that's on them for not scheduling themselves. Like, what do you want from me? What, like, just outrageous, Like, I don't think I have some right to speak at UC Davis, but if you schedule me, then I do. That's what academic freedom is all about. Not all about, but it's a big part of it. And then another thing that just happened, I was just in New York giving some talks. I went to, we had a talk at NYU. And then we had a talk at the Riverside Church. And the next day we were going to have a talk at Columbia Med School. Well, Columbia Med School canceled that talk literally as we walked in the door. That's just totally ridiculous. No, the organizers were smart. They figured that would happen. And so they had a bookstore down the street ready to go. So we just went over there. But this is just total cowardice. I mean, this is just outrageous. And again, the reason they gave was security. They said, I was like, oh, really? In the middle of New York City, with a police department bigger than most countries' standing armies, and in a building that's controlled, meaning controlled access to the building, you can't guarantee in the middle of a medical school in the middle of New York City that we're going to have a safe event. Yet we can walk down the street 10 minutes and have an event where we don't even bother closing the door and there's no violence. It's just outrageous, it's just stupid. There are so I haven't experienced any workplace issues myself, and my workplace is just so supportive that I really have to thank them for it publicly, and I do every chance I get, and my partners as well. They're just so, my partners means the people that are the other trauma surgeons with me. They're just so supportive. They like and actually, like, I had an opportunity to go on CNN Live, but I had to change my flight and I was going to miss a shift that I was supposed to cover. And our shifts aren't really a joke. Like, you're awake all night long, you're running around, you might be operating. It's physically taxing. Well, I just texted them and said, "Is there any way anybody can cover this?" And right away they did it. So no, I have a very, very unusual situation in that regard. But I know plenty of other people that have. Actually, there was I went and gave a talk at UCSF's med school, just to a small student group, and a woman with a Jewish Voice for Peace sign or a pin and a keffiyeh showed up. And at the end of the talk, she asked me the same thing. She said, "Have you experienced workplace retaliation?" I just told her the same thing, and then I asked her, "Have you?" And she said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Well, can you tell me about it?" And this is what happened. She's a Jewish woman. She's a full professor of internal medicine at UC San Francisco. It's very unusual to be a tenured professor, or not. I don't know if she's tenured, but to be a full professor of medicine. That means you've you've been working for a long time. You've been publishing for a long time. There aren't that many. And she went to an event that was about diversity at UCSF Med School or Med Center. I'm not sure which one. So the event is specifically about diversity. And everyone was just going around giving their little 2-minute spiel. I'm this and that, and I'm this and that. She got up and she said, "I'm a Jewish woman, born and raised in the United States. And you might notice that I'm wearing a Palestinian keffiyeh around my shoulders. And I don't see any contradiction there because I've always felt that the liberation of the Jewish people is actually intrinsically caught up now with the liberation of the Palestinian people. And so that's what I think we should think of, what's the term they use now? Intersectionality and stuff like that." So she said that. But apparently, and this is just what she told me, but by the time she got back to her office, she had an email from somebody in the administration saying that, number one, she would never be allowed to give a grand rounds at UCSF again. And number two, she would never be allowed to appear at any recorded event at the medical center again. For saying at a diversity event that she's Jewish and supports Palestinian liberation. It's just outrageous, So yeah, there have been, sorry, I'm going to get some more water. There have been plenty of episodes of utter nonsense like this, but we don't have to accept these things. Again, like me and the three other healthcare workers who've been to Gaza that didn't get to talk at the at Columbia Med School. We're writing a little thing to the Columbia student newspaper, and if Columbia wants to take itself seriously, then they can address this problem with their the way their med school runs. If they don't, okay, that's on them. I mean, I don't own Columbia Med School. I can't really force them to do it, but uh, yeah.
Kraft does. No, I'm kidding. Does he?
Well, actually, and that's one of the funny things is I don't know if people saw, but gosh, it was months ago now. Somehow, I think it was the Washington Post. Somehow, the Post got a hold of a huge text string on WhatsApp between billionaires in New York, and this isn't. I don't want to make it seem like I'm painting all Jews with the same brush in any way, but most of them were Jewish billionaires, and the mayor, the now indicted mayor, Eric Adams, I think is his name, and in which they were just going out of their minds demanding that he send the NYPD into Columbia to break up their student encampment. And they're all they're doing is sitting there like game planning. How do we do it? 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 It was disgusting. It's crazy. And this is an encampment on Columbia's undergraduate campus. It's like a third Jews in there. Like it's completely ridiculous. So and that's one of the things that Norm Finkelstein has said this, and I think I agree with him on this point, which is that these people are not Zionists. I know everybody likes to talk about Zionism, and that's fine, but they're not Zionists. These people are just obnoxious Jewish supremacists. They're not that different from white supremacists. And again, I just want to be very clear. I do not think the majority of Americans, or anywhere near the majority of Americans, fall into that camp. But there are people who do, and they're the ones that are supporting Israel. That's it. It's not like that's why I say like and actually again you can kind of see it. Younger American Jews, like I said, 40% of them. And then this was months ago. It's probably more now. 40% of them think that they don't just think what's going on is wrong in Gaza. They think it's genocidal. That's an extreme. That's an extreme conclusion. I think it's correct, but it's an extreme conclusion nonetheless. And I think it's because they've been raised in this era where the concept of white supremacy is no longer in the shadows. It's very well talked about amongst young people, and I think they just can recognize the same. What can you possibly? You listen to Benjamin. You just look at Benjamin Netanyahu and you kind of think that, but it's not. It's not hard to see. Or again, I mentioned. Gosh, I'm going to say his name wrong again, but Coates, Mr. Coates, the he's a writer, and he's an African American writer who wrote a book. I think the book's called The Message or something like that. I haven't read it, but he talks about. I'm not exactly sure what the point of the book is, but he's the only thing that's been public about it, or a big deal publicly, is the parts about Palestine. So he went to Hebron. Now, in Hebron, for people who don't know, there are Jewish settlements around the city. That's like every Palestinian city, but there's actually a Jewish settlement in the middle of the city, which is completely insane. I'm actually reading this book right now, Lords of the Land, for the second time. It's a very worthwhile book. It's written by two Jewish Israelis. It's very, very worth reading. It's about how the settlement enterprise was created. And so I just read some of the details about it last night. But this it's called Kiryat Arba. It means Campus 4. But it's an extreme right wing settlement, like just completely bonkers stuff. This is the settlement that Baruch Goldstein, when he moved from New York to what we should call Palestine, since it was the West Bank, when he moved to Hebron, to Kiryat Arba. That's where he moved, and Baruch Goldstein is the one who carried out the Tomb of the Patriarchs massacre, killing 29 people in the mosque of what's the name of the mosque at the
Ibrahim, right?
The
Masjid
Ibrahimi
The
al-Ibrahim.
Ibrahim
Mosque?
Mosque. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. The Ibrahim
Yeah.
Mosque. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm not Muslim, so I just don't know. I apologize.
No, it's
The
okay.
the Ibrahim Mosque. That's exactly right. And and the so yeah. So that settlement is right in the middle of the city. And this has led to an absolutely incredible, again, I hate to use the term, but this security situation in the middle of Hebron. Hebron is where I lived when I lived with Musa and his family. In the middle of Hebron, the old city, where where all the old market and everything is, there should just be bustling, is a ghost town. It is, there's no one there. You can look down this street and there's, actually, I remember the street was so empty and it was so shocking because there's apartment buildings on both sides. There's all these stores that should be open, but they're all shuttered. It was so long ago that I had a digital camera. I pulled out my digital camera and I took a picture of it. And then I walked, and all of a sudden I hear a slide, the slide of a gun racked, and I hear screaming in Hebrew. So I just kind of put my hands up because I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I'm looking, I'm like, who is even yelling at me? And then I looked over, and there was a pillbox, like a camouflaged military position. I hadn't even seen it. But like the street was just so empty, so I'd taken it. And they don't like you taking pictures of military installations, so he just made me delete it. But what was interesting is as soon as he's figured out that I'm not Arab, he just put his gun away. He's like, oh, that's cool. Oh yeah. What's going on, bro? He was an American guy, incidentally. He was from Boston. The it's nuts. So anyway, Coates went to Hebron, and you can see any of his interviews where he talks about it. He says that he doesn't use these exact words. I can't remember them, but he says basically in 5 minutes of being in this place, I knew I was in an apartheid state. It's so obvious. It's so incredibly obvious. It's just not hard to see. And it kind of implicates the American media. Going back to what Rima said about the dehumanization of the Palestinians, it goes back. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of American reporters who have gone through Hebron. Why couldn't any of them figure it out? It literally, I'm telling you, as soon as you enter the old city, it's so perfectly obvious. Anybody who's been there can tell me if they disagree, but it's just so
100%.
incredibly obvious. You've been there, right? Yeah, it's just so you're like,
Yep.
what the hell is going on in this place? And like Coates actually taught,
and those are the worst
realized a story,
settlers there too.
Oh, they're so. And you know what's funny, Taz? This is hilarious, and I swear to God, this is true. When the settlers are in the vicinity of the Palestinians, they are insane. I mean, like you'd think they're Nazis, and I'm sorry to use that analogy, but it's just completely incredible the way they act. The level of brutality is just shocking. I mean, it just blows your mind. But me and two other, I was there with two British people. This is not when I was living there, but when I was living in Haifa, and somebody's asking, is it true that there was an Israeli occupation forces person from Boston? Yes, actually, a lot of Americans go over and serve in the Israeli military. But so I was. Oh gosh, totally lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, sorry. So Kiryat
I think
Arba, again, it's just full of absolute nutcases, just violent lunatics. But me and two British folks, when I was living in Haifa, we just wanted to see, like, we're like, what is the inside of this place like? Furthermore, there's a shrine to Baruch Goldstein, the mass murderer, in there. And we really wanted to see it. So we were like, well, the three of us are American. So I literally like had my passport like this while I was walking up. But the three of us just walked up to the gate and said, can we come in and see the place? They were like, yeah, sure. We walked around. Nobody bothered us. One guy gave us bananas for no reason. They could tell we weren't Orthodox Jews. Everybody there was dressed the same way. Someone was like, he didn't speak much English. He said, America, America. We were like, yeah. He just brought us into his house. Nice, normal house. I mean, it's a religious Jewish house, but other than that, it's a nice, normal place. Gave us some bananas, sent us on our way. It's incredible. It's so their lunacy is so directed, and that's why I say that it's almost like Nazis. Like nobody in the 1940s actually like American Olympic athletes, African American Olympic athletes who went to Germany during the Nazi era came back and said they felt more comfortable there than they did in the United States. because they weren't the target of what was going on, right? Whereas here they were. And the same thing is true there. You know, I didn't feel unsafe in Kiryat Arba, even though I know it's full of a bunch of people that have murdered a bunch of people. I didn't think they were going to do that to me. And it's just because of who I'm not. And that's terrible. That there's no excuse for this. And this level, and again, I always try to bring it back to the United States. That level of dehumanization is not going to go away by people talking to each other. It's just not, unfortunately. The only thing that is going to do it is to tamp down the level of violence and give it time.
Okay. Um, okay, so let me go ahead and go to Dr. Anas.
Hello, how you doing? Um, First, I just wanted to say I really appreciate these types of excuse me, lives because, as Rima said, humanizing them, the Palestinian people, and what they're going through is a form of resistance because it's very easy to disconnect and not see them. And these types of stories and are really making such an impact. So I want to thank you for allowing people to hear stories, your story specifically. And um, I was at a fundraiser for the orphans in Gaza, and they're estimating it's going to be around 20,000. And Dr. Mads Gilbert was lecturing a little bit, and he spoke about medical apartheid, and the deputy minister of health, Dr. Yusuf Abu Rish, he says that's going to exponentially unalive. There's certain TikTok words that we can't use, but more people than any boom boom or any of those things. And the triad is dehydration, starvation, and disease.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you were talking about a little bit earlier. And literally, when Dr. Knockout asked about, children and whatnot, it was just like you literally hit point by point by point. You spoke about it a little bit, and he also went on to talk a little bit about polio and how the occupation allowed vaccines to come in, but more because he just they didn't want it to spread to Israel. And in fact, not to help out, the kids because they're not even able to get the basics of life right now. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about specifically, because how do we, you know, he pointed out, Dr. Mads Gilbert pointed out that, the biggest thing is how do we continue to support. So I'm a physiatrist by training. I went on to do a hospice palliative medicine fellowship, addiction specialist, brain injury specialist, and I forgot one more piece of paper. My wife said I'd have to find a new wife, so I stopped at 5. But so as a medical community, how do we best support the existing medical communities? We do some like fundraisers for on the ground type of efforts and things. I don't know if there's anything you feel would make a bigger impact, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So yeah, so all of that is great. Anything you can do to support the Palestinians in Gaza, the medical workers, anybody else is great. But I just had, and I know I keep saying the same thing, and I don't mean to sound all doom and gloom, but giving aid to the Palestinians while they're being physically destroyed is just not the way to do it. All of our efforts right now really should be focused on getting the administration to at least stop Israel from destroying Gaza further, and lifting the blockade, because unless it is, it's just nothing is going to change. We can the Palestinian Ministry of Health, the Gaza Ministry of Health just released a report about healthcare workers who are identified as having been killed in Gaza. They're known to be dead. It's all over 1,000. I think it was 969 were fully identified, and I think 1,100 or 1,200 were thought to be dead but couldn't be fully identified. Well, the upper number is like, in other words, Israel has killed as many healthcare workers in Gaza, just healthcare workers, as everyone who died on October 7th, or every Israeli who died on October 7th. That's crazy. I mean, that's nuts. In this, I'll tell you, the healthcare workers were, and I don't say this to demean them in any way. I hope nobody feels it's that. The healthcare workers were all waiting to die, and they told us that. They felt that they were specific target when they're right. They weren't wrong. They knew, I should say, that they were specific targets of the health of the Israeli attack, and they were just waiting to die. It was a very frequent thing to hear. Um, so, yes, rebuilding Gaza's healthcare infrastructure, rebuilding Gaza's healthcare system will all be important. Um, Getting them the mental health care that they will certainly need is important. Um, but none of that, it doesn't make a lot of, and again, I don't mean to contradict you in any way, but to me it doesn't make sense to talk about doing that while they're still feeling like it's very hard to convince somebody that they should go about living a normal life when they're absolutely convinced that they're just going to be murdered from the sky at any given moment, and that's what they all think. And again,
Yeah,
they're not wrong about it. I mean, one out of 1,000 healthcare workers is one out of every 20 in Gaza. Imagine if one out of every 20 people you knew was dead, or that you work with was dead. That's a wild number to contemplate. And just to think, well, I'm going to be next, and if I'm not next, I sure wish I was, because I'm tired of burying my friends. Journalists in Gaza, it's the same thing. Israel has apparently killed 10% of the journalists in Gaza. These are not. I don't think that in the middle of such an attack, I don't think there's any kind of real support that can be given other than to stop the attack.
makes sense. I
And,
mean, it
and
makes sense. It's almost
it's
like, you've got
very,
a major
which is
artery.
extremely disheartening, I know. But sorry, what's
Yeah.
that?
I said, no, I just, you being a trauma surgeon, it's like, going after the little arteries or little bleeds, and then the major arteries, severed, so to say. So it's like, it's almost not pointless, but kind of pointless at the same time if you don't control
Yeah, no,
the
I
most
don't. I just to be clear, I don't
detrimental.
want anyone to think it's pointless. I don't want anyone to think it's pointless at all. But it doesn't solve the core problem.
For
And
sure.
I just to be clear, that I don't want you to think I'm just criticizing your efforts. Me going to Gaza didn't do anything either. It didn't solve the problem. It did allow me to talk about it. It did allow me to, and of course, I helped some individual people. Like Jury would probably be dead if I hadn't been there. But she's one kid out of like what 50, 60,000, and her life
Yeah.
is not meaningless. I don't mean, and like that's certainly not what I'm trying to imply. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to when I got that video from. I assumed she was dead when I left. Well, after I left, I assumed she had died. And then when I found out she hadn't, I actually almost cried on the PCRF stage. It was kind of embarrassing, but they it doesn't get to the core of the problem, though. It doesn't solve maybe to make a different analogy, like you were saying, I can fix somebody's aorta after a car crash, but it would have been better to just put guardrails on the highway and not have them crash in the first place. That's what's going on here. We just need to stop or maybe better. It would have been better not to put landmines on the highway. Maybe that would be a better analogy here. All we have to do is not keep putting landmines on the highway, and this can all stop. And then we can go about the job of, which is going to be very real, and it's going to take actually not years, decades of sustained attention, which I can't say I'm fully confident that people will do, but some people will. Some people like you will. Hopefully, I have that staying power as well, and some people will help to rebuild what we have so callously and I've run out of words other than insane, but
Yeah.
so callously and just with no concern for what we're doing, just
And
destroyed.
so many people just sitting and watching. That's, I think, the more insane thing to me is, never in my life,
Yeah,
we just came out of COVID, and I was like, wow, that was probably one of the most insane periods of my life. And I'm like, there's nothing that's going to be crazier. And well, I was proven wrong, because we've been watching, a whole year of a G-side and HCOS, so to say, and we're sitting and watching it in real time, live streaming with people right on the ground, and it still hasn't stopped, and nobody can stop it.
yeah. Well, no, but just remember, it's not that nobody can stop it. Nobody has stopped it. That's for sure. But
Nobody has
it's not that
stopped it.
nobody can. One guy can, Joe Biden.
Sure,
All he has to
sure.
do, is pick up. No, he's I don't have any hopes that he's going to, obviously, but all he had to do is pick up the phone. Ronald Reagan people might know this story already, but Ronald Reagan, or I guess a lot of these people are younger. Ronald Reagan was a president of the United States, and he was a lunatic, just an absolute barn burner of a lunatic. Absolutely, just loved violence. He committed. Are we not supposed to say G-side? Is that the way you said it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the, yeah.
Is that like a TikTok
yeah,
thing? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a
No, no
TikTok
worries.
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Well, Ronald Reagan presided over several of those in Latin America.
yeah.
Several. Now there were smaller communities of hundreds of thousands of people, not millions, but that doesn't change anything. And he was perfectly happy about it. He didn't mind. Uh, During Israel's, Reagan was president in 1982. And in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon and killed about 20,000 people there, destroyed the entire place. And it was all for political reasons. The claimed security reasons were transparently idiotic. In fact, the claimed security reasons were so stupid that Avner Yaniv, he was Israel's leading strategic. He was actually the founder of Israeli strategic analysis. That's an academic discipline that puts together history, military affairs, things like that. What he called the threat to Israel was what he called the Palestinian peace offensive. The Palestinians were being so, and this is literally true, the Palestinians were being so peaceful and so reasonable in their attempts to negotiate with Israel that Israel just had to invade and destroy them because obviously it was just completely nuts. So so Reagan, after Israel had concentrated almost the entire population of southern Lebanon in Beirut and was just mercilessly destroying the place, Reagan called Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister at the time, and he said, and I think this is quoted from Reagan's memoirs, but he said that the symbol of your country is becoming a 3-month-old baby with its arms blown off. Why couldn't Biden have done the same thing? He's got many more 3 months old that he could have referred to. Well, he hasn't done it, and that means we have more work to do. That's all there is to it. And truth be told, it may not be possible to get him to stop it. It may not be possible to get Kamala Harris to stop it either. In that case, Gaza is going to be completely destroyed, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we have to keep trying because, again, like I said, Gaza is not the only place on earth. And the West Bank still exists, and India still exists, and Indonesia still exists. There's a lot of places where a lot more misery and just appalling suffering can be visited on people if the techniques that have been perfected, I guess you could say, during this attack are allowed to be spread to the rest of the world. And that's a very scary thought. And not just spread to the rest of the world, but used on the Palestinians on the other side of Israel. And then probably on the Palestinians within Israel too. It's very, very scary time. And we have to keep working on it, even if we think all is lost. Have to keep working on it.
Well, I appreciate your time. I'm going to drop, and I look forward to seeing you again on these lives because it sounds like you've got a lot of Doc was saying, can reach a lot of people, and this is so important to hear and humanize. And thank you, Taz, for hosting and doing this live. It's excellent.
Thank you, Dr. Anas. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. All right, we'll go to Freedom Advocate. Go ahead, sister.
Hi, hello everyone. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Taz and the team for preparing and organizing this session. It's very important to hear experiences like firsthand. And the second thing, I want to thank the doctor for his courage. It takes a lot of courage to go to a war zone, and not just any war zone, a war zone where doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers are specifically targeted by the enemy, which will bring me to a question that was in the comments. Someone asked if you were ever felt threatened by the ITF. My question to you that us as advocates for Palestine, we are faced with a level of denial like no other. They deny like literally everything. I've seen an interview for another doctor who was in Gaza talking about how children are getting targeted by the ITF in specific parts of their bodies where they know that they can't survive it. My question to you, did you ever had any injuries to like that proves that they are targeting children? Another question is the testing of weapons in Gaza. Have you ever have any like injuries, that something that you have never seen before, where you knew that it is a new weapon that is being tested on the people in Gaza? My last question is, one of the claims that we get all the time is how women especially are happy when their children are getting unalived. So I want you to talk about like the mental statement of the people when they bring in their unalived family and loved ones. The last thing I want to say is a note to you. It is very important to amplify your voice and hear you even more and more on these platforms. I know that you did interviews on news channels and all of that, but what we most target is the younger generation, where they are getting indoctrinated now into hating the Arabs in general and the Palestinians specifically. And it's very important for us to have your voices, you and everyone else who was there, to tell everyone their experiences. I know news channels are heard by like older people, but at this point, and I'm sorry to say that, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But we still need to work on the younger generation, and the younger generation now is all on TikTok. So I encourage you and everyone who was there to get an account, get active in social media, tell their stories, be the voice for the people who were there. We get some stories, but we don't get everything. That is why it is important for you guys to be their voices. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Can anybody remind me of the question? Sorry, it was one was.
Go ahead and remind him of the first or one of the questions.
My questions were if you had like specific injuries to prove two things. One is that
so that's an important. So let's talk about that one first.
Yeah.
So we Taz mentioned that we wrote an article in the New York Times about the widespread shooting of. It's not about this, but one of the things we mentioned is the widespread shooting of in the head and chest of children in Gaza, and we're talking about small children, not 17-year-old men, but or 17-year-old boys, but pre-teenage children, young kids, and one of the questions that I asked in the poll that I took of American healthcare workers was if you worked in the appropriate setting, did you see children shot in the head or the chest on a regular basis? Again, young children. And 44 out of 50 or something like that said yes. I was kind of surprised that everybody didn't say yes, but yeah. So the shooting of children in the head is happening throughout Gaza. It seems to be happening in the catchment area of every hospital in Gaza, and it seems to be happening on a regular, if not daily basis. Now, I'm not a war crimes investigator. I can't say that like the kid, I don't know, 6-year-old Muhammad on January 25th was shot in the head, and that attack was a war crime. I just don't have the capacity to do that. I have no way of investigating it. I have no way of knowing, because unfortunately, the way war works, I don't really think this is a war, but that's a different matter. The way the laws of war work is that if there might be times when a kid gets shot in the head, and it's actually not a crime. Because there was a crossfire, whatever, fine, but it's very hard to argue. So again, in a specific instance of a specific shooting, I can't really say, and neither can any other healthcare worker. But when it's happening in the catchment area of every hospital on a regular, if not daily basis, it's very hard to believe that that's not deliberate. That's completely silly. And like I've heard some people say, well, how do you know Hamas isn't shooting them? Well, okay, if you think that Palestinian mothers are so genetically deficient, which I've already explained why they're not, but if you think that they're so genetically deficient that they just don't have any desire to tell the world that Hamas is slaughtering their children, even the ones who have fled Gaza and aren't there anymore, it's just absurd. Like, this is just transparently stupid. The So nobody with any like shred of dignity in their head thinks that Hamas is shooting these kids. So that means the Israelis are shooting them. Okay, fine. It's not really even hidden. There's not much attempt to hide this. I mean, like TikTok videos and Instagram and whatever other social media platforms people use, they're just full of Israeli soldiers bragging about doing stuff like this. It's not hidden. There's plenty of video footage from people's cell phones and things like that showing children being shot in Gaza, and in circumstances where it's completely impossible that they didn't do it, that it wasn't on purpose. Like there's a famous case of a 3-year-old boy. His name was Imad. I can't remember. His name was Imad, and his cousin's name was Hadul. Hadul was a 20-year-old girl. She was a 20-year-old woman. She was a medical student, and Imad heard that the little 3-year-old boy heard that there were clementines available in the market. And being a little boy who had only eaten pita for 3 months at that point, he wanted one. So even though it was dangerous, his cousin agreed to take him to the market to try and get them. And on the way back, right outside of their home, in the middle of an empty street, there's no shooting going on. There isn't Hamas running all over the place. In the middle of an empty street, an Israeli sniper, and it was a sniper in this case, that's pretty clear from what happened, shot Hadul, the girl, in the chest while she was holding Imad. So they both fell to the floor. After a while, a crowd gathered behind a building so that they weren't exposed to gunfire, and they realized that Imad was still alive. So they try to retrieve him. This 3-year-old boy, in the arms of a 20-year-old woman who was holding a sack of oranges in one hand and a boy in the other. They shoot at the crowd so that they can't get to these bodies. Okay? The crowd then gets a wooden plank and hooks it around Imad's jacket, and at that moment, Imad is shot dead. It's pretty hard to argue that that's not deliberate. I mean, that itself. And now, to be fair, that's one instance. Maybe that Israeli sniper happens to be a total lunatic. And that, so we have to be a little bit careful with what we can prove and what is just perfectly obvious. It is perfectly obvious that Israel is killing children in Gaza on purpose. And people disagree with me about this, but I seriously doubt that the defense minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, I seriously doubt he gets on the phone and says, "Get 10 kids today, guys," and then with his generals. That's silly. There's no reason that I don't think that that's what they're doing. But this has been going on for a year. This killing of children has been going on for a year. You can't argue that the Israelis don't know about it. I mean, they have drone footage. They scour the internet for every video. Our own open letter saying that we saw this on a daily basis has been downloaded in Israel several hundred times. So I know the Israeli government has access to it. In fact, I got the letter translated into Hebrew just in case they don't. And just in case no one in the Israeli government speaks English, quite unlikely. And they know what's going on. They're not confused about it. Most of their soldiers wear body cameras. I'm told that their sniper scopes have video equipment in them. Their tanks probably have video equipment on them. All the drones obviously have video equipment on them. I'll tell you, there was literally never a time in Gaza that I didn't have a drone overhead. So, and they know who they're shooting. They know what's going on. And it's just obvious that this is being done on purpose by the people doing the shooting, whether they're snipers, soldiers, drone operators, who the hell knows in each instance. But the fact that the Israeli army is not stopping it means they're fine with it. It's been going on for a year. If it happened for a week after October 7th, maybe you could say, oh, people are in a rage and the Israeli army just hasn't gotten control over it. But after a year, that's pretty hard to argue. So I think that's obviously evidence of deliberate killing of children. I don't think there's any. I don't think anybody could possibly claim other. I don't think any honest person could possibly claim otherwise. And then I think at the beginning you asked, did I ever feel threatened by the IDF? Not directly. I never encountered an IDF soldier in Gaza, and I'm very thankful for that. But not directly. But I'll tell you, Bill, I think I mentioned at the beginning. The there were continuous explosions when I was there. Not within the hospital grounds, but and they shook the hospital continuously. I was knocked out of bed by some of them. They knocked instruments off of our OR tables. They blew out windows on the third floor of the hospital. Yeah, so did I feel under threat? Yes, in terms of if a bomb drops on me, it's gonna kill me just like it kills everybody else. But I was never actually threatened like directly by an IDF soldier. I never saw the Israelis have surveillance drones that stay way up high. And I think some of them have missiles and stuff on them, but they also have these much lower hanging drones that are gun mounted called the Palestinians call them quadcopters. I don't know if they have some technical Israeli designation as well. I'm sure they do, but I don't know what it is. Chris McGrew wrote an article about them in the Guardian. I'm pretty sure, but I never personally saw one of those. I saw plenty of people that had videos of them and things like that, but I never saw one personally. I did hear Palestinians say, "Oh, did you hear that? That's the quadcopter." That's it. But you look around and it's already gone. And just speaking, I think you asked about novel weaponry as well. So there's a good book by an Australian fellow named Anthony Lowenstein. I think it's called the Palestine Laboratory or something like that. And in it, he details how Israel and the United States test weapons on live human beings in Gaza, in the West Bank as well, but especially in Gaza. But it's not just the weapons; it's extensive methods of surveillance and control, extensive methods of confusion, of propaganda. It's a lot. I read the book a long time ago. I can't remember. Well, not a long time ago, a few years ago. So I can't remember exactly if he talks about those things as well, but those are almost more important than the weapons themselves. The Israelis are fighting. I hate to use the term fighting because the Israelis are fighting women and children. Well, that's not called fighting. That's just called murdering, right? I mean, that's a pretty simple thing. It's not like Hamas doesn't exist. I mean, Hamas does seem to have disabled a large part of the mechanized army. Does seem I think about one soldier has been killed each day in Gaza, but it's kind of obvious that Hamas is not any kind of real military threat to Israel. You can just look at it. What happened when Israel tried to invade Lebanon? The first day, 8 soldiers were killed, and then they basically withdrew because they didn't want the soldier casualties. So they're testing these weapons not to see if they work in battle, but just to see the damage that they actually do to human beings. That's just. I mean, again, I've mentioned the Nazis before, but I don't think, especially in this particular thing, I don't think that making that analogy is off. I think that's we all know we should all know about the experiments that Nazi doctors did on Jewish concentration camp victims, and they're shameful. But I don't really see much difference between that and seeing how a particular bomb kills children in real time who have nothing to do with anything other than wanting to play. I think that's one of the things that does get to me when I think about it is the level of, like other people have mentioned, the level of dehumanization and callousness even towards kids, small kids, it's ugly. It's real ugly.
Yeah, my last question, the previous question, I still have 2 if it's okay, Taz and Doc. Is that okay? Okay. So the question
I know, just take it like not too much, just because I want to give a chance for Brother Anan, and then that way, I know you, Dr. Sidhwa, you said you're here for a while, but I know I appreciate every minute that you've been here with us. So thank you so much. Go ahead, Freedom, and then we'll wrap up the Q&A with Anan.
Thank you. The question that I asked was like they claim that the families there, they give birth for their children to be a shaheed. I want you to elaborate on the mental statement of the families when they bring someone who was unalived or injured to the hospital.
Yeah, so I was talking before about Juri and her dad. I have never seen. I'm telling. I know people will think I'm exaggerating, unless they've actually been to Palestine. But I have never seen people more fanatically devoted to their children. I really haven't. It's just it's an incredible thing to see. Um, it's just I already told the story, so I don't want to tell it again, just because so people don't have to listen to it again. But I have never ever once seen somebody walk in and say, "Oh, Muhammad died. Awesome. That's exactly what I was going for." You know, it's just that's not. These people are human. Like it's just the idea that that's I will tell you the propaganda around that is just it's just crazy. I mean, like I have I went on a podcast with a fellow named Noam Dorman, and he showed me this video of some guy from Hamas. I don't know who it was, saying that the interviewer asked him, "Why don't you let the civilians of Gaza come into your tunnels so they'd be safe from the bombardment?" Well, first of all, the tunnels are not safe from the bombs. I mean, you're talking about bunker buster bombs that are being used. But secondly, the guy's answer was, well, the tunnels are so that we can fight the Israelis and so that we can hide from their airplanes. The tunnels are not. It's the Israelis are occupying Gaza, and it's their responsibility not to kill people wantonly. And Noam said, "Look, see that means he wants all the Palestinians to die, and he's using them as human shields." And I said, "Noam, I don't have any love for Hamas, but that's not what that guy said at all. Like, what are you talking about? If this is the best example you could come up with, then you don't have a leg to stand on. That's absurd." The guy's just saying that in war you're not supposed to kill innocent people, and I mean, it's kind of rich coming from Hamas, to be fair. But that doesn't mean he wants everyone in Gaza to die. Like, what are you talking about? These are just very silly arguments. One thing I would encourage everybody, and I can only imagine how hard this is if you're Palestinian. I'm not so. Somebody asked my ethnicity in the thing. I'm Parsi. If anybody cares, it's a very very small non-Muslim minority from the India, Pakistan, Iran area, mostly from South Asia. So I can't imagine how hard it must be to do what I'm going to recommend doing next, if you're Palestinian, because this kind of thing must just drive you insane. But I would ignore the more ridiculous and racist rhetoric that comes out of the extreme right. So like if you like that guy Noam that I was on his podcast, he wouldn't characterize himself as an extreme right wing guy, but he is. And his the fact that he was willing to ask me if isn't it true that Hamas is just trying to get every Gazan killed so that Feroze can go write a New York Times article about it. It speaks to, first of all, a total lack of understanding of anything that's going on there, but secondly, it just speaks to an unbelievable level of dehumanization. How can you think this whole society is full of people who don't care if their children get killed or not? That's just transparently idiotic. Elephants don't act like that. And you think human beings do? Like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Dolphins don't act that way, but you think human beings do? Like, come on. This is outrageous. It's just completely insane. So when you're looking at these things, I would encourage people to mostly just ignore that in terms of because you're never going to hear that, for example, from an anchor on CNN. You might hear it from a guest on CNN. That's possible, but you're not going to hear it from an anchor on CNN. So even in the heart of the mainstream, the rational mainstream of the United States, people don't think this way. If you go over to Fox News, yeah, it's true, but Fox News is just a propaganda outlet. I mean, CNN's not way better, to be fair, but you just if you're focused on if you focus on this small, relatively small, it's not all that small, unfortunately, but if you focus on a relatively small minority that is just maybe I shouldn't swear, that is just totally crazy, then you're going to waste a lot of your time. And I can only tell you how tempting it must be to do that, because You're like, look, I'm here. I'm a mom. I'm not wanting my children to die. How dare you say this about me? But that's the visceral just disgustingness of what they're saying is just meant to take your attention away from talking to otherwise rational people who can be persuaded of something. And you know, I'll tell you, like even just taking Trump supporters, right? I won't use his name, but my boss is a right wing guy. He's a right wing Christian fellow, and he's a Trump supporter. Nevertheless, after I came back from Gaza and we talked about it for about 5 minutes, he's just like, Feroze, I had no idea it was that horrible. And then you know, that same question came up. Is it true that that no, it's not true, Frank? Oh, it's not true. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. That's all it took. You know, that's literally all it took. Is just, you know, he said, I always thought that was weird. It didn't make any sense to me that there could be like whole societies of people where they just want their kids to die. I was like, they're still human, right? I mean, even because again, he's a very, 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 very right wing Christian guy. So he's like, Muslims are still human, I think. I mean, you know, but this is you know, people can be very easily convinced of these things. Most people have children. I actually don't, but most people have children, and most people cannot imagine the idea that any religion, any culture, anything could break the bond between a mother and a child. They just can't understand it, and because it isn't true, you know. So that's I wouldn't. And again, I don't. Please don't think I'm trying to tell you how to conduct your life. I'm not. You should do whatever you think is most important, and I'll support you in doing that. But my personal advice would just be to focus on things that you can actually on people you can actually reach, and it's not the people that have to be convinced that you're a human being. That's a waste of your time, and further, I actually think it's a waste of your dignity. I got to be honest, I actually felt like I lost a little bit of my humanity going on Noam's show, just because of what he said and the way that he talked about people. Nevertheless, I thought it was important, you know, and actually I didn't know who he was. He called me and asked me to come on his show in 2 hours notice, and I did because I happened to be in New York at the time. But you're not going to, it's almost like asking if a Jewish person in a concentration camp could have convinced the guards that he's a human being who deserves to be set free. Kind of a waste of time, you know, dig
Yeah,
trenches
well,
instead.
today I saw a video at a Trump rally while the speaker was talking about the Palestinian children. And basically what he did was a call to unalive all Palestinian children, because he said is that they are taught to unalive Jews and Americans at the age of 2. So he basically like excused the G-side, even encouraged to unalive these children, because apparently, according to him, when they grow up, their sole goal is to unalive Jews and Americans. So my question is, like, have you ever seen or witnessed anything of that kind, that their sole purpose is to unalive people?
If it was, then they should have killed Mark when they had the chance. No, obviously not. This is just again. It's not even. I don't want to. I almost feel dirty even answering the question. The answer to the question is no, absolutely not, definitely not, under no circumstances. And that's just, you know, like furthermore, so like you can go on that. There's a website called MEMRI. It's just an Israeli propaganda outlet, but they purport to translate Arabic news channels and show that, look, this is what Arabs say to each other, and when they think we can't understand their fancy language, and so they put up things about Palestinian children being taught that Jews are their enemy. Okay, do you really think kids need to go into a classroom in Gaza to figure that out? Well, now, again, when they say Jews, they mean Israelis. They don't mean Jewish people in general, and they're very clear about that. It's pretty easy to figure out. If you talk to a Palestinian for 5 seconds, even like they all know that Jews live elsewhere in the world. But if they didn't, if you would explain that to them, they'd just say, "Oh, there are Jews that don't live here and don't bomb me. Oh no, they're fine. I don't care. Why would I care about them?" Literally 100% of them will tell you this. I'm sure the founders of Hamas would have told you the same thing. And in fact, they I shouldn't say I'm sure they would have. They did. Nobody thinks this. It's not a serious. It's what I'm trying to say is this isn't an argument. that these people are making. It's just complete nonsense. They know that, but they think it'll play well. And the other thing I'm trying to say is that in my very limited experience talking to Trump supporters, because I don't want to, jump off a roof, but in my very limited experience talking to them, it doesn't take much to convince them otherwise. And I'll tell you actually, I think the more I'll tell you a story. I was at someone's house for dinner or something. This was, I can't remember. It wasn't that. It was months ago. Sorry, I just can't remember. But there was it was mostly, it just happened to be in a milieu that it was mostly Jewish people that were at this party. It was in New York City. It wasn't here. And somebody said something about and I wasn't there like as a speaker or something. It was just a gathering. Somebody said something about the killing of children in Gaza. This was two Jewish folks talking to each other. And there was a younger one and an older one, and they are a younger person and an older person. And the younger person said, "Yeah, but look how many kids Israel's killing, man. Come on." And that person responded by saying, "They're Satan's spawn. You got to get rid of them." And the people who had only kind of been peripherally listening looked at him like he was insane for saying that, because he is. And you should have seen how embarrassed he was. All of a sudden he realized, oh, wait, I'm not allowed to be crazy. I'm not allowed to say stuff like that. Oh, and he tried to walk it back immediately. But, people are, there are some very loud people, like I assume the people that show up at Trump rallies, or at least show up to speak at Trump rallies. There are some very loud people who are willing to say some very ugly things, but just don't let them guide your conversation. Just don't do it. Let your own humanity and let your own understanding of what people will listen to and what they will believe guide how you talk to people. Don't let these loud a-holes. That's all they are. I don't know, whoever that speaker was. He actually should be on trial at The Hague. That's a war crime. It quite literally is a war crime. Just like incitement to commit murder is a crime. Incitement to commit what are we supposed to say, G-side, is
Yeah.
also a crime. In fact, it's a crime that people have been punished for before. Well, we don't live in a country of laws, so unfortunately that won't happen. But you don't have to assume that everyone else is also as crazy as he is. They're not. They're really not. And they are some people, yeah, but you just don't try to ignore those people as much as you can, and focus on the people that you can actually talk to, because there's a lot of them, and they're not getting. It's important to remember there are the majority of Americans. But by polling, the majority of Americans want the United States to stop sending arms to Israel. Now, it was Rudy Giuliani. I would believe that. The majority of Americans want the U.S. to stop sending arms to Israel. Now, there's multiple reasons for that. It's not because Americans love Palestinians, unfortunately. The reason it's because people are just nativists and don't want to send arms anywhere. It's because they don't know what Israel is. But a big part of it is the slaughter that's going on. And it's not, I'll give you another example. I was on ABC News maybe 4 days ago now, 3-4 days ago. I was on ABC News Live. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked by their coverage. Because, when you're sitting there waiting to go on TV, you can hear this. I don't watch TV news, but you can hear what they're saying in your head. Or in your earbuds. And I couldn't believe how critical the coverage was. They just straightforwardly saying people are being starved, children are being shot, women are being shot. There was nothing hidden about it. So there's a huge segment. Let me put it this way: you are not going to stop and reverse the dehumanization of Palestinians in this country before Gaza is obliterated. There's no way in which that time scale works out. That's going to take decades to reverse that dehumanization to a significant degree. Look at how little the dehumanization of black people has changed in the United States in 150, 200 years. Not a lot. Not a lot. So that's a very, very long-term project. And in fact, it probably requires something like a social revolution. But there are huge segments of the population that are already willing to listen to you. They're already willing to listen to you. So don't focus on the people who are lunatics. Focus on the people who are sensible and can actually do something and are actually willing to do it. That would be my advice from that standpoint.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
the advice. Thank you so much again to you, to Taz and the team who put all of this together. Last thing, people are asking about your mental health, and I will mute after going out of Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Freedom. I know you answered that, Dr. Sidhwa, earlier, so if you want to just quickly answer it, and then we'll go to Anand.
Yeah, sorry, Taz is realizing that I never answer anything quickly.
Oh
Yeah, no,
no, I mean,
my mental health is
you have it.
no,
You
it's
are doing
okay. So
amazing.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. My mental health is fine after leaving Gaza, but I'll tell you a large part of what drives me to do the work that I've been trying to do is, I don't know. I don't want to psychoanalyze myself. That's probably a bad idea. But I think a large part of it is just that I can't forget what I saw. I mean, I can't. It's not, I'm glad I don't have intrusive re-remembering or nightmares or anything like that. But like I mentioned, I think I'm the only person from my trip that doesn't. Because what we saw it was pretty shocking. Seeing a whole society being starved and slaughtered is not, it doesn't go away easily. I'll tell you that.
Thank you, Dr. Sidhwa. Thank you, Freedom. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap up the Q&A with Brother Anand. Go ahead, Anand.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for giving us this time. I really take my hat off for you. Even though we know most of what you were talking about, big part, but seeing things out of your eyes, like when you were talking about dehumanizing Palestinians, you just gave me like flashback. I lived in South Africa for 4 years, and I was brainwashed by the white society, the Afrikaners, all the time. They were dehumanizing the African people. So yeah, you got a very good point. I do think that you are one of a few who has a very deep understanding of the Palestinian cause, since you lived in Hebron, which is my hometown. Um, uh, I'm not going to take any of your time. I promise it's going to be only 5 minutes, and I'm not going to ask you any questions that needs any explanation. But I've been thinking of making a documentary, which is a bunch of interviews for doctors who came back from Gaza. Or at least who worked in Gaza, who worked in um, West Bank. So if you could help with, I'm looking between 10 to 10, 15, maximum 20 interviews with 20 different, 10 to 20 different doctors. That would be really great. So I'm going to talk to Sister taznemoo after the live, hoping if we could connect and work on this
Yeah, no
together.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, no problem. There are already
the
people
very,
working on a documentary like that, so I think if people combine efforts, that would be great. Yeah, absolutely.
that's good. That's good. The very last thing, I would encourage you to write your own book from your own point of view. I really do, because you are an like external eye. You got nothing to do with anyone. You went there, you looked with your eyes, and you have a very fair position to talk about this. It was very important what you just mentioned about your boss, who's a very right wing guy, and it took you only 5 minutes to
Yeah.
flip him upside down. So I would believe that a book like this, with your experience, it's not going to be 5 minutes. It's going to be a lot more than that, but it's going to change. Not 5,000, not 50,000, maybe more. Other than that, Thank you for what you are doing and for what you have done. It really takes a real man to do what you're doing. I take once again my hat off for you. God bless you and thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, man. Just one thing I'll say, you mentioned that you came from a place where you knew you had experienced that dehumanization yourself, yet when you
Hmm.
went to another place, it was easy for people to bring you into that system of dehumanization anyway. And that's common. That's not uncommon at all. My parents were actually exactly the same way. They came from a place where, because they were non-Muslims, they were really looked down on. Pakistan is a difficult place for non-Muslims to survive, especially under the al-Haq dictatorship, which is when they left. And when they came to the States, they very quickly fell into racist stereotypes, very quickly. And they still hold to them, actually. So that's not uncommon, but nevertheless, you're living proof that those things can actually pretty easily be overcome. It just takes a little bit of experience, a little bit of discussion, and I think people are pretty willing to drop those things by the wayside because it's kind of a burden off your shoulders. Like, oh, I don't have to hate this whole group of people. Cool. That's easier, actually.
Yeah. One last thing I promise I'm gonna finish with, which is when you're talking about those kids being killed, and I agree with you. The defense minister wouldn't call and say, "Hey, I want 10 or 15," but on the other hand, we have an ideology that is being taught in those religious schools.
Yeah.
They are being they know that, or they do believe that they are superior over others, and
Yes.
it is amazing. It's amazing. It connects again to the dehumanizing of
Yeah.
Palestinian. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
thanks again.
I don't. No. Thank you. Yeah. No. I don't want to. Like I said, I seriously doubt that like the Israeli army brass is saying make sure this many kids are killed. But but nevertheless, the soldiers who are doing the shooting, either soldiers or drone operators or whoever, they are clearly doing it on purpose. At least some large number of them, right? That speaks to the level of dehumanization. And what's even worse, in my opinion, is that it's known to the brass, the brass, the top of the Israeli army. They know full well that this is going on. They just don't care. It's obvious that they don't care because they're not doing anything about it. Actually, like when I was on CNN and then when I wrote in the New York Times, and I think one other group, I can't remember, they all specifically asked, has the Israeli army investigated a single case of an unwarranted shooting of a child in the head since October 7th? And they just refuse to answer the question. So they know it's happening and they just don't care. And I think that's terrifying. That's really scary. And that's very, very good evidence that we should not be arming these people. It is. What's the argument to make against that? Oh no, we should arm them anyway. Why? Can,
Doctor, when I lived in South Africa for 4 years, so it was a while. And since I was like an outsider, um, uh, my color helped me to blend in with white people. So they
mhm.
would open up and they would tell me terrible
Yeah,
stuff. They would tell me stuff that is horrifying, you know. It's just because they
yeah.
think that they are from a different level.
Right. Yeah, I was in Zimbabwe I worked in southern Zimbabwe for 6 weeks in the middle
Hmm.
of my first year of med school. In the same way, they when Afrikaners looked at me, they kind of figured, oh, this guy's going to be on our team. They would just say, I mean, the nastiest stuff you can imagine.
Hmm.
I mean, real. The girl I went with was also Afrikaner. She was a very decent human being, but the people we hung out with, oh my God, it was
Yeah.
wild. I mean, things that like if the G side
Have they
word
told you
is not
that they
allowed
are
here.
apes? Have they told you that those
Yeah, oh
are
yeah, yeah.
apes? They
No,
are
I
not.
really like
Yeah.
just absolutely insane
Yeah.
like stuff from like 1700 from like Europe in the 1700s or something. Like things that you
Yeah.
couldn't believe anyone actually says anymore. It was shocking. Yeah. And again, the
We.
Palestine, it's not that different. There's a just talking about the dehumanization of the Palestinians. The Gideon Levy is an Israeli journalist, and he tells a story about how he was in He was coming through an Israeli checkpoint in the West Bank, going back into Israel to go home after some journalism thing, and he he noted there was an ambulance at the checkpoint, and he could just go through the checkpoint because he has Israeli plates, but the ambulance wasn't moving, so he waited, he waited, he waited. After like an hour, and he could see the soldiers at the base. They were or at the checkpoint. They were just sitting there playing cards or something. So after like an hour, he gets out and he goes to the ambulance driver and he says, "What's going on?" He said, "I don't know. They just haven't talked to us yet." And so Gideon Levy got, he's not a patient person apparently. He went out and he went over to the soldiers and he said, "What are you guys doing? Why don't you take care of this ambulance? It needs to go through." And they said, "Yeah. They can wait. They can wait." And nobody was angry. They just said they're just trying to shoot him away. Then he said, "What's wrong with you young people? What if that was your dad in the ambulance?" And then these Israeli soldiers pointed their weapons at him and they said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. How dare you compare my dad to an animal like the Arab in the back of that
Wow.
ambulance? Who do you think you are?" And he, and it was just an instantaneous reaction. Nobody had to, that's the issue there.
And that's
but
the most honest reaction you get when when it comes without thinking, right?
Right. No, exactly. And so that's very scary. But again, that we have to remember, Israel can be the most racist place in the world. They can't do what they're doing without our weapons. That's what, and not just our weapons, our diplomatic and economic and other support. If we stop that, this occupation, the whole conflict just goes away. I mean, it doesn't become paradise. That's not what's going to happen. There's a lot of hatred that's been built up for a long time. But without our support, this conflict in any recognizable form to what it is today ends. And that's what matters. That's what we have to get. If we care about the people, any of the people that live west of the Jordan River, we have to stop arming them because the arms are just fueling this completely insane death spiral.
It does. Well, thank you again. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Hoping that we could catch up some other time, maybe on other panels. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Brother Anand.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sidhwa. It was an absolute honor having you tonight with us, sharing your eyewitness testimony and having the opportunity to ask you some questions. Thank you again so much. I hope we get another opportunity to have you, and maybe we can get you a TikTok account. We'll see. We're working on that, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I'll work through you for now.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody that was here, that shared this out, that helped and spread the word about this. This has been something that we've been working on for quite some time now. I appreciate all of you. I'm so sorry for everybody that has been asking to come up. There's a lot of requests to come up. I apologize. Hopefully next time, if we can bring Dr. Sidhwa again, I will definitely try to bring up more people, and maybe we'll have just like a main Q&A for most of the time, most of the session. So if we can get that done, that would be amazing. So I appreciate you. Thank you again so much. And we will keep in touch, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you again, Dr. Sidhwa. I will go ahead and drop you, and thank you again.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Oops.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you guys all for being here. I apologize for not allowing basically or having everybody to come up. It was not, we started off with just introductions and then the questions and answers, but hopefully next time if we're able to get him, we'll have more of an opportunity to bring everybody up. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you again so much. You guys are all amazing. Let's continue to spread the word. I hope this was very informational and educational live for you guys. Continue speaking for those that are the voiceless, and continue to spread the word on Palestine. And as always, free Palestine from the river to the sea. Salam, and good night, good morning to wherever you are. Thank you.
Bye. WTAS, WT.